Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Became Dragon King. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A scream echoed through the Kuo town hospital as a woman labored with her third child. The labor stretched on for 10 hours, a grueling ordeal for the mother and a strain on the father, who worried silently about the child's paternity for reasons he could not fully explain. When the DLVOI finally ended, the medical staff found something unexpected, an egg-like vessel rather than a typical infant. It was unlike anything the doctors had seen. The form inside continued to develop, and in certain light a small figure could be seen bearing tiny horn-like protrusions and folded, wing-like shapes along its back. The staff covered the vessel with blankets and moved it to a quieter room, stunned and uncertain how to proceed. They arranged for specialists to examine it the next day and prepared to run tests to learn more. The next day, veterinarians entered the building and were led to the egg. They inserted a needle and drew a sample of blood to run tests. A few hours later, the results showed that Goro Hayato was only partially the boy's father. The other DNA belonged to a different man who was recorded in the system as deceased. The husband could not reconcile how the other man's genetic material was present. He developed a deep resentment toward the boy because the child was not entirely his, and he resolved to raise the boy on his own strict terms. If the child resembled the other man in any troubling way, Goro vowed to punish him for the rest of his life. 3 years later, Goro Hayato sat at breakfast and watched the boy they had named Issei stumble into the kitchen, looking for something. Goro demanded in a cold tone what Issei was doing in the kitchen. Issei looked toward his father and froze with fear. He trembled and backed up until he hit the wall. Goro reminded him sharply that only 1 cup of water was allowed and ordered him to take it and leave. Issei, grateful for the small allowance, took a single cup and ran back to his room to hide. He had broken one of his father's rules by speaking back and feared the consequences. Goro came to Issei's room carrying instruments of punishment. Issei tried to hide under the bed, but his father found him and grabbed him roughly. Goro dragged him to the basement, removed his clothes and tied him to the wall. He struck Issei repeatedly until the boy lost consciousness from the blows. When Issei regained consciousness, he cried out in pain from an injury to his leg. Goro ordered him to be quiet and threatened to leave him alone in the basement like he had before. Issei, in a weak voice, asked if fathers were supposed to protect their children. Goro reacted violently again, striking him and rendering him unconscious. He left Issei tied and injured in the basement, bleeding and in tears. Issei, alone and hurting, prayed to God for help and begged to be spared from seeing such treatment again. Issei stepped out of the basement after defying his father yet again. His father had demanded that he let them take his scales to sell for money, but Issei could not bear the pain when they were removed and had refused. As punishment, his father had dragged him into the basement and used tools on him, forcing him to endure hours of agony. He had finally managed to come back upstairs by morning. It was the first day of school and Issei was 10 years old, in 6th grade. His family had returned him to public school after his friend Irina had been sent back to the UK, leaving him feeling utterly alone. They gave him only enough food to keep him alive, and teachers and classmates had noticed his gaunt, fragile appearance. A school officer approached him as he entered and asked if he was all right. When Issei, shaking, asked for help, the officer dismissed him, saying his parents had warned that he would lie about his situation and telling him to go to class and remember his place. The officer walked away. Throughout the day Issei kept to himself. Most of his classmates avoided him, unsettled by how small and skittish he seemed. 2 boys, Matsuda and Motohama, took notice of his loneliness and made an effort to befriend him. Issei learned that they were mischievous troublemakers, but they had reached out to him, and he decided not to tell his parents about his new acquaintances for fear of making trouble at home. By the end of the day Issei walked home alone, careful that his new friends would not be seen by his parents coming or going. When he opened the front door he found a note saying his parents would be gone for a week and trusting him to take care of himself. He breathed a small sigh of relief at the thought of a week without them, imagining peace and enough food. The cupboards, however, had child locks, and he used scissors to open them. He washed his hands and started making dinner, completely unaware of a small camera in the kitchen that recorded his every move. Issei had always been hyper-aware, but he missed that camera, and the knowledge that it existed would haunt him later. Over the following days his health began to recover as he ate more regularly. One morning his parents arrived to see him off to school, giving him a look that made clear there would be consequences if he was not home on time. At school, however, things worsened. Because he associated with Matsuda and Motohama, rumors started and more students treated him as if he were trouble. He hated being linked to their reputation, but he stayed silent. One afternoon, leaving class, Issei was cornered by members of the kendo club who angrily accused him of inappropriate conduct. They held their shurnai in a threatening way, and his body trembled at their presence. The situation escalated quickly and a crowd gathered. The leader of the club raised her shurnai as if to strike, and Issei collapsed inward, curling into a small ball and begging not to be hurt, his voice cracking as he cried out for his father in panic. He trembled so violently that some onlookers mistook his fear for something else, while others simply watched without intervening. An inner voice, sharp and mocking, told him he was making a scene. That voice spurred him to his feet, and he fled the courtyard with tears in his eyes. The commotion had drawn attention. Matsuda and Motohama arrived moments later, calling for him and scanning the area. The kendo club leader told them he had run off. Motohama urgently demanded to know what had happened, trying to understand why their new friend had bolted in such a state. The whole school had never seen the two brothers behave so tenderly. Earlier there had been a misunderstanding involving another student, but it had been cleared up. Issei was hiding in a tree, gripping a branch as if his life depended on it and shaking like a leaf. Matsuda climbed up to meet him, knowing that Issei had always loved the amber-colored leaves on that tree. Matsuda asked if Issei was all right and, remembering how Issei had always taken blame for him and Motohama at school, gently urged him to come down. Matsuda thought of all the times Issei had been the scapegoat and the quiet one who bore punishment at home while no one believed him. He knew the police were not an option and that getting Issei's parents to understand would likely be impossible. Issei looked down at Matsuda with a terrified expression and asked if they were gone. Matsuda reassured him that his parents were not there and encouraged him to climb down and accept comfort. Issei obeyed, and Matsuda wrapped him in a steady, calming embrace as Issei trembled on the verge of a panic attack. Matsuda soothed him, careful not to trigger more fear. Matsuda remembered a previous time in the forest when Issei's panic had spiraled into something uncontrollable. Issei's fear had manifested as a massive draconic transformation that threatened to destroy the surrounding woods, and it had taken hours to calm him. A priestess they had met nearby had sensed a draconic presence and sent them home. In time they had learned that the presence came from Issei. That memory made the present moment more urgent. Issei needed help, but it seemed unlikely anyone else would be able to give it for years. When Issei arrived home, he found his parents waiting. Goro held a whip in his hand and his mother held a knife. They smirked and announced that Issei needed to be punished. They took him into the basement and subjected him to severe, violent punishment that left him shaken and terrified. Nobody in the house intervened. Unbeknownst to them, one of the kendo club members had followed Issei home out of concern. From an open window she had seen him in the basement enduring the abuse. She recorded the scene on her phone to show her parents and to prove that what people murmured about was true. She had never seen Issei so drained of life. His eyes in the dim basement were duller than they had been at school. When his parents left the basement and fell asleep on the living room couch, the girl dropped some food through the window to Issei. He looked up and found the brown-haired girl staring at him in horror. She told him that she had recorded the abuse and planned to show it to her parents and friends so that he could be removed from the situation. Issei asked weakly for her name. She introduced herself as Murayama and promised that she would help. Before she left to inform others, she urged him to hold on a little longer. 2 years later, Issei attended preschool, hiding behind a tree as his horns and wings had grown more prominent. His parents had dressed him in clothes that left his wings exposed, and he kept to the shadows, afraid of the teachers and classmates who mocked his appearance and told him he did not belong. A child with short tan hair ran over and asked if he was okay. Issei stammered and asked who she was, wary and fearful. The girl introduced herself as Shido Irina and smiled, showing no sign of disgust at his horns, wings, or his mismatched eyes, one amber, one brown. Issei managed to tell her his name, Issei Hayadu, in a trembling voice. Irina stayed by his side for the rest of the day as other children and adults in Kuo ridiculed both of them for being together, but she did not care. Issei had made a new friend. When Issei said he had to go home because his parents would be angry if he was late, Irina waved and said she would see him tomorrow. About 15 minutes later, Issei arrived home to find his parents waiting with angry expressions. His father, Goru, forbade him from leaving the house anymore, and his mother, Miki, declared that they would teach him at home and threatened harsh consequences if he disobeyed. Issei could not understand why other parents were kinder to their children. When he was near people, they screamed and recoiled. He felt isolated and frightened of his parents. He did not argue. He went for his room, but his parents shoved him before he reached the stairs, and he left the house. Later, Issei was seen in the living room eating a piece of bread, growing dangerously thin. He wondered why the god Irina had mentioned at school did not answer his prayers. No matter how he prayed, nothing seemed to change. The next day, Issei was roughly awakened when his father grabbed his arm and hauled him from bed, twisting and forcing him into a sitting position. His cries were muffled as his father clamped a hand over his mouth and pushed him into compliance, making threats and laughing cruelly that Issei would regret being born. Within a week, Issei was removed from the basement and rescued from his family's control. On a Sunday afternoon, the police arrived and took him into protective custody. Issei was sleeping in the basement when his father came down the stairs. He had scooted into a back corner as soon as he heard the door open and froze when the light flipped on. Gorohide looked at his malnourished, half-son in the dark and smiled with obvious cruelty, saying that he would make Issei feel unworthy of life. Goru then seized Issei by the hair and struck him repeatedly, leaving the boy bruised, terrified, and vomiting from the blows. Between coughs and pain, Issei managed to tell his father that he would speak up and that Goru would be caught. Goru only wondered aloud if Issei really believed he would last that long, then resolved to crush the small hope the boy still had before the end of the week. That decision would prove to be his gravest mistake. Day 1. Issei woke afterward with severe bruising and intense pain across his body. He could barely move without agony. When he checked behind him, he realized that one of his wings had been badly injured and no longer moved. By morning, most of Issei's injuries had unexpectedly healed. He did not understand why, only that his body seemed to recover overnight. He suspected that he could survive future punishments because he could mend while he slept, unaware that a portion of his aura was quietly repairing him. He spent the day resting and letting the healing finish. Day 3. His parents attacked him again, forcing him into a corner after using a knife and kicking him. Despite the pain, Issei forced himself to stand and meet them. With a hard, determined gaze, he resolved to survive and one day leave the family that had never loved him. His parents then beat him with a whip, leaving painful welts across his back and chest. Day 4. Issei devoted the next day to recovery. While he rested, a small, green gem-like mark appeared on his left arm and a voice spoke in his mind, apologizing for his upbringing and explaining that it was a power bonded to his left hand. The voice told him to keep surviving and that the friend who had helped him would come to save him. Terrified, Issei asked who was speaking. The voice replied that it was the power in his left hand and urged him to hold on. Issei lay back and wondered if he was losing his mind after hearing a deep, powerful voice inside him. Day 5. That night his parents brought friends to the house and the beating became worse. By morning Issei was barely conscious and the inner voice admitted it would take a miracle for him to survive the night. He thought about Murayama and worried for her, then thought he saw a silhouette at the window and heard a soft gasp. Unsure if it had been real, he fell asleep wondering whether help would come. Day 6. Murayama actually arrived the next day, standing outside the window with food and water. She smiled, relieved to see he was still alive, and promised that she would make sure his parents were held accountable. Issei, confused, asked why she was helping him when she had never noticed him before. Murayama replied that no friend of hers should ever have to suffer like he had and that parents should protect their children, not punish them for things beyond their control. She told him that police officers would be coming the next day to check for signs of abuse and urged him to scream as loudly as he could if he wanted to escape. She left bread, fruit, and some cooked meat at the window and then walked home. Day 7. Issei lay on the basement floor, exhausted and badly injured after another violent beating, when he heard the house above him stir and the sounds of officers searching. He asked the voice of Drake in his mind to force a sharp jolt of pain that would draw attention. Drake responded with a huff and began to push against the bonds of the house in his own way. Issei unleashed a fierce, pained roar that echoed through the walls like an otherworldly cry. The police above heard the sound and forced the basement door open. They found Issei curled on the floor, weak and clearly abused. The senior officer ordered paramedics to be called and demanded that the Hyudu couple be arrested. Officer Hammond reported to dispatch that Unit 56 had a case. A young boy with horns, wings, and a tail in a rundown home, and urgent medical assistance was needed. Dispatch confirmed that paramedics were on the way. The officers read the arrested couple their rights and placed them into custody. 5 hours later, Issei was in the hospital while doctors treated his injuries and explained that, because of his unusual physiology, he would need to remain under observation to recover fully. He asked if his friends Murayama, Keitase, Motohama, and Matsuda could visit, and the doctor confirmed they could. When the friends arrived, they found Issei propped up in bed and wearing a red gauntlet on his left arm. He explained that he had been speaking with Drake in his head, introducing the spirit of the heavenly dragon of domination. Drake told him in his mind that anyone who would abandon him for what he had become did not deserve his friendship, and that he would train Issei to defend himself. Motohama reacted with bewilderment at Issei's behavior, while Murayama, Keitase, and Matsuda exchanged amused looks. Issei attempted a playful, low roar, which sent Murayama and Keitase into laughter. He answered their questions about his condition and said that, once his wings healed, he would be able to fly. He smiled shyly when Murayama and Keitase found his eyes striking and full of life. When Motohama asked how long his hospital stay would be, Issei said a week at best and a month at worst. The friends promised to watch over him during his recovery. Keitase noticed that one of his eyes was slit, and Issei admitted that his dragon instincts made him want to protect the girls, a comment that caused them to blush. A week later, Issei left the hospital and testified at trial about the abuse he had suffered since early childhood. The court found the evidence compelling, and his parents were sentenced to indefinite imprisonment. 4 years later, on the last day of middle school, Issei walked the halls known for his unusual appearance. Rather than hide, he had become someone others came to for support. Students asked him how he had survived and found the strength to move forward. He always credited Murayama for finding him in that basement and helping him escape the life he had endured. When he had first left the hospital, he had cried on Murayama's shoulder as she held him, grateful to be free and thankful for the friends who stayed by his side. Issei walked through the orphanage, feeling the familiar sting of being looked down on by others. The orphanage was not as cruel as his parents had been, and he did his best for the younger children, teaching them about the world and encouraging them never to give up. When he saw some younger kids being bullied by a group from another school, he ran to intervene and demanded to know what they were doing there and why they were picking on the children. At 17 years old and a second year at Kuo Academy, Issei carried himself with a lone wolf air, but he could not stand by when others were mistreated. He stepped forward to shield the kids and, with his wings unfurling to make his presence more imposing, told the bullies that he would not allow them to gang up on middle school students and that he expected better of people his own age. The bullies sneered and left after trading a few insults about his appearance. Once they were gone, Issei turned to the orphans behind him and asked if they were okay. The boys thanked him with wide-eyed admiration, calling him cool. Issei smiled and offered a simple lesson to help bolster their confidence. It does not matter if someone seems stronger, what matters is being able to keep smiling through adversity. He sent the boys on their way to school, warning them not to skip class, and watched them run off. As they left, Issei reflected on his first days at Kuo Academy. He had been nervous and shy on his first day. His friends Matsuda and Motohama were louder and more forward, and he, sometimes felt awkward around their crude jokes, but he did not behave like them. Kendo club members Murayama and Keitase had rescued him from his lowest point 5 years earlier. Murayama had found him in the basement of his home and had recorded the way his parents had treated him. Her actions had exposed the abuse and allowed her family to take him in. Issei regarded her as a sister. He had always felt protective and brotherly toward her, and he teased her about her affection for Keitase in a familiar, light-hearted way. When Murayama came out to her parents, Issei stood by her and told her family that their attitude would not change who she was. They eventually relented. After that, Murayama asked Issei questions about the supernatural. The next day he revealed his sacred gear and told her about the being bound to his soul. The being, Drake, reacted with surprise to Murayama's orientation and with amusement about Issei's romantic inexperience, which led friends to tease both of them. Once, when Murayama struck Issei's armored hand with her bakken in a scolding gesture, Drake reacted loudly and comically. Later, Issei walked through his school courtyard and noticed the girls admiring him from a distance. He felt uncomfortable with the attention and also puzzled that few people commented on his more unusual draconic traits. A bully from his middle school days confronted him and called him names, reviving old resentment between them. Issei answered briefly and walked away, refusing to stoop to the bully's level. Drake internally questioned whether Issei would fight back, and Issei explained that he would not lower himself to that sort of confrontation. He took his seat in class and focused on a weekend assignment asking what each student wanted to be in the future. Issei found the question difficult. As a child he had dreamed of being a free dragon and a hero, but the future felt uncertain. He remembered Irina Shido, whom he had known briefly when they were younger and whose kindness had helped keep him grounded during his darkest times. Even after only a few days together, Issei still considered her a meaningful figure in his life. They told each other secrets no one else knew, and when he confessed to Irina that he was some kind of dragon, she corrected his earlier assumption and explained that she was a tomboy. He was relieved and they grew closer. As children they had always played heroes and villains. At 5 years old, it was the best their imaginations could manage. Even then, Issei decided to make his wish as a young Drake true. He wanted to be a draconic hero, a protector of everyone, both supernatural and ordinary. He did not aspire to become a devil, angel, or fallen angel. Being a dragon was enough for him. He finished his dream list, which included becoming an artist and a hero for all he could see, then turned his assignment into the basket and returned to his seat just in time for the teacher to begin class. The day dragged on as teachers lectured about math, science, literature, English, and health. His favorite class was PE, which let him test his physique and served as training for his sacred gear, boosted gear. He had unlocked the balance breaker months earlier and was practicing holding it for longer PRDS while trying to develop new forms. He wanted something different from Juggernaut Drive, which he knew drained life force. In practical terms, it would kill him before he defeated many foes because of his limited stamina. Tension rose when Kiba Yuto, the school's attractive rival, challenged him. Issei's draconic instincts flared and he accepted. The school responded with gossip about the rivalry, but Issei remained oblivious to most rumors. He could be easily angered, calm as a pond, and hopelessly dense at times, which earned him a reputation for being airhead. Only his close friends, the Occult Research Club, and the Student Council actually knew he was supernatural. They invited him to join their peerages, but he declined, saying he was too powerful. He did offer to train with them occasionally. Sona nodded at his reply while Rias pouted in a way that seemed almost playful. Issei, swept by teenage feelings, regarded Rias as a potential love interest. Rias often flirted with him, and Aquino sometimes teased him with a more mischievous edge, which left him confused. At the end of the day, as he walked home with Murayama, a woman with long black hair and violet eyes approached them. Issei avoided staring and tried to read her intentions. The woman asked if he was Issei Haidu. Issei unfurled his wings as an intimidation tactic, something he used to test people or make them back down. The woman showed no fear, and even Drake registered impressed surprise in Issei's mind. The woman blushed and told him she would like him to be her boyfriend. Issei was stunned, and Drake echoed that shock telepathically. Issei screamed in confusion. Drake reacted with equal surprise. Both recognized a fallen angel. Drake had sensed the presence before Issei could put it into words. Yuma Amano approached and explained that she had been watching Issei because of his kindness and wanted to know if he would go out with her. Issei, bewildered, agreed. Yuma ran off, promising to meet him on Sunday. Issei asked Drake whether the fallen angel's interest was genuine affection or a deadly trap. Drake warned that it could be either and advised him to be prepared. They continued to Murayama's house and found Murayama speaking with her father about Keite's visiting that evening. Mr. Murayama told them that Issei should keep an eye on Murayama and that there should be no trouble. Issei assured him that he would watch over her while keeping an appropriate distance, earning a nod from the father as he left. Murayama, grateful, hugged Issei to thank him for his support, and Issei replied that protecting a sister was his responsibility. As the day went on, Issei realized he only had a few days until his date with Yuma and awkwardly asked Murayama what one did on a date. Murayama reassured him that if someone liked him, outward appearance mattered less than who he was. She then helped him pick clothes so he would feel presentable for Sunday. A few hours earlier, a white-haired little girl had watched the interaction between Issei and the fallen angel from a distance. After learning the date, she went to inform her master. The red-haired woman listened and confirmed that the fallen intended to make a move against him on Sunday evening. The little girl, Kaneko, added that Issei carried the scent of a dragon and an aura of dominance. The red-haired woman considered this new information and began to prepare. On Sunday, Issei walked to the town center and encountered a woman handing out summoning papers. Drake explained that those were summoning papers issued by the local devils and suggested that Issei was drawing the attention of the Gremory family. Issei sighed at the growing involvement of the supernatural in his life. Yuma arrived in a pink blouse and navy jeans, her hair in a ponytail, and apologized for being slightly late. She invited Issei to enjoy the day together. They spent the afternoon at an arcade, where Issei won an angel-themed prize for Yuma and watched her reaction carefully. They then stopped at an ice cream shop. When Yuma accidentally spilled some ice cream on herself, Issei quickly helped her clean up, offering napkins and acting politely. Yuma had briefly worried he might react poorly, but his considerate behavior put her at ease. As evening fell, they walked to the park and paused near the fountain. Yuma explained that she needed to confirm whether Issei posed a threat to her faction. She then transformed into her fallen angel form, taking on the appearance of a grown woman with long, dark wings and a stern, guarded expression. Yuma announced that she intended to eliminate any threat to her faction and prepared a light spear. Issei stood steady as Drake supplied tactical information he could use in defense. As Yuma prepared to strike, Issei fixed her with a cold, determined look. Issei raised his power and invoked Crow, accusing Yuma of hiding his true feelings from the moment they met. Yuma stood there, sweating under the oppressive dominance of Issei's aura, and both the red-haired woman nearby and Kaneko could sense the surge of energy. Issei fixed his stare on Yuma and demanded to know his true name. The red-haired woman shouted that his power was rising rapidly and that it had already eclipsed hers, fear written across her face. Issei repeated his demand for a name, voice edged with anger. The woman identified herself as Rainier and declared her intent to kill him. Issei replied that he would make her end as painless as possible, remaining eerily calm. Issei unleashed a concentrated burst of energy that struck Rainier in the chest. She cried out and fell backward, incapacitated by the impact. Issei stood over her, insisting that he would never allow his emotions to be manipulated, and then released a final, decisive technique that dispersed her presence without graphic detail. Rainier's defiant cry faded as she was defeated. After the confrontation, Issei retrieved the slip of paper and used it to summon the sender. He was surprised when Rias appeared, one of the school's highly regarded seniors. Rias rushed to him and hugged him, expressing relief that he was all right. She explained that the Fallen had been after him and that she had been unable to reach him in time, then asked him to come with her. A few minutes later, Issei was seated on a couch in the Occult Research Club room, admiring the room's candlelit atmosphere and the devilish sigils that decorated the space. He apologized to Rias and explained that he could not be reincarnated by her because he was simply too powerful. When Rias asked how powerful he was, Issei said he could take on what Drake had called a mid-class dragon and essentially win without breaking a sweat. Rias took this to mean he was stronger than a high-class devil and brightened at the possibility. Rias then revealed her problem. She was being forced into a marriage she did not want with a man named Riser Phoenix, who referred to himself in the third person and intended to use her for his own selfish purposes. She pleaded for help. Issei, calm and patient, offered to try to assist. Rias thanked him and said that if he could find a way to reincarnate her without the issue of her power, she would join his peerage. Issei agreed that he would come when Riser arrived to help Rias, and she expressed her gratitude. She admitted that she wished he could join the occult research club but that they were full at the moment. After Issei left the room, Rias promised herself that she would secure the Red Dragon Emperor's support. She looked at a photograph of herself and her older brother and smiled sadly as she made that silent vow. Issei woke up to muffled noises coming from the neighboring room and moved away. He refreshed himself and went to school. As he walked toward the academy, Drake made his presence known and expressed concern about Issei's state of mind. Issei explained that he had heard noises next door and had avoided the area. Drake laughed and teased him about his luck with others, then shifted to a more serious tone about Issei's feelings for Rias Gremory. Issei admitted that he liked Rias but doubted she felt the same. Arriving at school, Issei entered the occult research clubroom after classes. He had grown closer to the club members than to Matsuda and Motohama. Their presence had eased his usual nervousness. Rias had mentioned an unwelcome visitor from the underworld that day, and Issei could tell she was upset. Having a dragon nearby made the room feel different. Dragons were beings of raw energy and not to be taken lightly, especially one who had endured hardship in his past. While Issei was sharing snacks with Kaneko, a pure yellow magic circle appeared on the floor and summoned a man in a burgundy suit with spiky blonde hair, Riser Phoenix, heir to the Phoenix clan and Rias's arranged fiancé. A woman with long silver hair braided at the back and icy blue eyes stood nearby. Her power far exceeded Issei's. Riser's arrival put some people on edge. Riser stepped forward and made a forward move toward Rias that unsettled the room, and Issei immediately intervened to create space between them. Riser reacted with indignation, and Issei made it clear that such behavior toward Rias was unacceptable. He placed himself protectively in front of Rias and emitted a low, instinctive growl that conveyed his protective instinct. The sound surprised everyone and left Rias blushing. Riser summoned his peerage to act, and one of his servants, a girl in Chinese-style clothing, launched an attack with a staff. Issei met the strike calmly and used a precise maneuver to send her away without injury. He told Riser that he was disappointed if that was the clan's strongest servant, and his cheeky remark broke some of the tension, drawing nervous laughter from the room, even from Riser for a moment. Riser briefly tried to recruit Issei as a source of amusement, but Issei declined and warned him to leave Rias alone, adding that it would be unwise to anger a dragon. Riser left after issuing a challenge. He declared that he would face Rias in a raiding game and aimed to put Issei in his place. As he departed, he told Rias she had 10 days to prepare. After the confrontation, Issei asked why anyone would threaten someone who clearly appeared stronger than them. Rias confirmed that Issei's aura suggested he was indeed stronger than Riser. She perceived Riser as relying on a group of supporters, with his strongest members serving as his queen and rook. Issei announced that they had power similar to a high-class devil, but he was as strong as a mid-class dragon, which stunned the group. A woman then said she would inform Rias's brother that Rias accepted the raiding game decision and that Rias had another piece in her peerage, and she departed through a magic circle. Issei suggested that, now that it was over, they should go home, collect their things, and begin training the next day, unconcerned that he had been mistakenly listed as part of Rias's peerage. Rias said she would meet them all tomorrow and they would head to her parents' estate to train for the raiding game, then she walked away. Issei was walking home when he noticed a nun searching the town. He approached and recognized the language she spoke as Italian, which he had learned at school, so he addressed her in Italian and asked if she was all right. The woman brightened and said she was glad to find someone who could speak her language. She had long blonde hair down to her lower back and emerald green eyes filled with wonder and kindness. Issei felt an inexplicable urge to protect her, So he brought her home, explained her situation to his foster parents, and they allowed her to sleep in his room. They trusted him to act respectfully. That night Issei slept on the floor while the woman took the bed. Late in the evening he asked her in Italian what her name was. She apologized for not giving it earlier and introduced herself as Asia Argento with a warm smile. Issei introduced himself as Issei Hayadu and then fell into a deep slumber. Issei walked to school with Asia as they made their way toward the abandoned church on the hill overlooking Kuo. He still struggled to hide his draconic nature. People fled whenever he came near. Asia noticed their fear and asked why they were running away. Issei explained that people were afraid because he was part dragon and that he did not know who his father was. He added that he had been born with dragon-like features and had suffered abuse from his parents before being rescued a few years earlier. He told Asia that people feared he might behave like a feral animal. Asia asked why he stayed close to her if others were afraid. Issei said that he felt peace and calm in her presence and did not know why. At a nearby park they found a young boy with a scraped knee crying from the pain. Asia moved to him and used her power to heal the wound, then gently told the boy to behave for his parents. The boy thanked her and his mother shot Asia a wary glare. Issei noted that the boy had thanked her. Asia explained that she possessed the sacred gear called Twilight Healing, which allowed her to heal others, including devils. She then told her story of being abandoned at birth, raised by a church in Italy, and discovering her healing power. Over the years she had made no lasting friends and had been expelled from the church after she healed a devil who had come asking for help. Issei recalled what he had learned from Drake about the supernatural. Devils could not normally approach houses of God unless they were strong enough to withstand the pain they felt near them. He told Asia that, for that reason, he thought she should not have healed that devil. Issei said that although healing was the right thing to do, devils should not be near houses of God because of the fragile truce between the three factions. If a devil had been near her church in Italy, he suggested, the devil might have sought her out on purpose to get close to her. Asia fell silent. She had been trying to defend the man who had begged for help. He had been clearly in need, and she had not hesitated. But she remembered the odd expression on his face when the head of the church discovered she had healed him. Issei's explanation made sense. While not all devils were malicious, the man's manner had been unsettling. His gaze had lingered in a way that made her uncomfortable, and there had been a calculating, possessive look as if he expected something in return. She had left before he could press whatever claim he intended, and now it seemed likely he had been angry to lose that chance. Asia worried that Issei might be in danger because of her past encounter, but she also felt unusually safe beside him. His presence gave her a protective sense that would deter anyone who tried to take advantage of him. At the same time she felt a confusing warmth in her chest and a flutter of uncertainty when she thought of him. She wondered if she was developing a strong attachment already, but quickly dismissed the thought as premature. They had known each other for only a few days. They reached the abandoned church and a man in a fedora opened the door for them. The man in the fedora announced that their arrival had been expected and that Lord Azazel had been waiting for over a week. Issei asked whether Asia would be safe in the fallen man's care. The man in the fedora assured Issei that she would be safe and ushered Asia inside. Asia thanked Issei as the doors closed behind her and felt the building settle around her. Inside, she asked where Lord Azazel was. The man in the fedora replied that Azazel was nowhere to be found and muttered with a cold smile that he would not be content to do only a simple errand. He intended to take her sacred gear and deliver it to Azazel himself. Before she could react, the man struck and Asia fell unconscious. As she lost awareness, a strange, distressed sound rose from her throat. She did not yet understand that it was a dragon's call for help, a summons whose meaning would only become clear to her on another day. A day had passed since Issei left the church, and a gnawing worry told him something was wrong regarding Asia. He felt a distress signal from another dragon nearby but did not know who it was. Drake had said Asia might be a dragon tamer and could have dragon blood. If what he felt was true, he had to save her. He flew from his home as fast as he could. He did not want Asia to be left alone. He wanted to show her what it meant to have a friend. He arrived at the church and found a man with a light spear standing at the door, waiting. Issei quickly neutralized the guard before he could react. then burst through the door to confront two fallen angels. One wore a trench coat, the other a Gothic-style outfit. Issei told them he did not want to kill them but demanded to know where Asia was, offering to spare them if they cooperated. The two fallen angels fled rather than fight. Issei blasted apart the center of the podium, revealing a staircase leading downward. He ran down the stairs and kicked open a huge set of double doors. Inside, Asia and the man in the fedora were in the middle of a ritual. Issei immediately incapacitated the henchman, stopped the man in the fedora, and destroyed the altar to prevent the ritual from continuing. He placed Asia on the ground and, not noticing at first, failed to see another fallen angel in the room. This new opponent was every bit as dangerous as the Grigori leaders. He was a six-winged fallen angel, Kokobeel's right hand, named Serial Tamriel, a powerful warrior whose strength rivaled that of a high-class devil. When the fallen angel attacked, Issei sensed the killing intent and dodged, receiving only a light graze from a blade. He instructed Asia to run to Murayama's home to stay safe while he handled the fallen angels. Asia nodded and fled. Issei turned and was struck by a forceful backhand that sent him flying into the Kuo Mountains countryside. He planted his feet to halt his movement. The fallen angel landed before him, rage evident on his face. The fallen angel declared that Issei would suffer for interfering with Kokobeel's plan and attacked again. Issei observed the aggression and offered a terse remark that the fallen angel was being overly aggressive as he dodged a spear strike. Issei began to boost his power with the boosted gear to keep pace with the fallen angel. He knew Kokobeel was a leader of the Grigori, and he wanted Rias to know that someone of such high status had appeared in her backyard. When the fallen angel feigned weakness, Issei fired a dragon shot that struck the attacker and did more damage than he expected. The attack also helped conceal Issei's presence, making him difficult to detect. Using the concealment, Issei snuck up behind the fallen angel and surprised him by restraining him tightly to prevent escape. He knew that letting the fallen angel flee would spell disaster, so he ensured the threat could not continue. As the restrained fallen angel struggled, the two fallen angels who had fled earlier returned with reinforcements and prepared to attack Issei. Issei tightened his grip and ended the fallen angel as a threat. With that danger removed, he turned to face a group of hostile crows that advanced on him, and he readied himself for another fight. 5 days later, Issei slept in his room, recovering from the energy spent fighting the fallen crows. He felt exhausted and close to his limit. The previous night he had returned home battered and worn clothes torn, feathers clinging to him, an injured arm and a sprained leg, but Asia had been there to help him clean up and dress his wounds. From her perspective, it had been a striking sight. Issei walking in with his clothes tattered and black feathers stuck to him like soot. Asia would remember that day as proof that Issei would do anything to keep her safe. 24 hours remained before the fated battle between Rias and Riser, and Issei was eager to see how much stronger everyone had become during their 10 days of training. He had trained lightly while resting to regain his coordination, and he had done what he could without pushing past the pain. Overall, he felt ready. He had even finished his homework in time to travel to school for the fight. He planned to present Rias with a new member for her team, hoping it might help in the upcoming battle. During the 5 days of recovery, Issei had been teaching Asia basic magic so she could defend herself from enemies. She had shown a natural talent and picked it up quickly, and Issei felt proud of her progress. Issei entered the occult research club room with Asia. Rias stood by the window, her expression a mix of worry and determination. Issei announced that he had a new member for Rias's team, which left both Rias and Asia momentarily puzzled. Asia asked what he meant. Issei explained that Rias's group were devils who could protect Asia better than he could alone, and that Rias treated her team like family. Asia asked whether Issei was part of Rias's team. He replied with a wry remark that he had been told he was too powerful for that role. Rias asked if he was truly sure he wanted Asia to join her team, seeking confirmation. Issei affirmed his choice and then turned to Asia for her opinion. Asia smiled and said she wanted to stay by his side. The warmth of Asia's smile overwhelmed Issei, and he fainted from the sudden rush of emotion. Asia cried out in fear and rushed to his side. Kiba observed that Issei was simply overcome by cuteness overload, when something affected his emotions too strongly. Aquino clarified that he tended to pass out whenever something was too much for his heart to handle. Kaneko bluntly noted that, since Asia was so adorable, Issei would likely faint like that more often. Asia, flustered, momentarily forgot about Issei on the floor. Asia lay on the ground as Rias placed the bishop piece on her chest and completed the ritual to bind her to the Gremory name. After the ritual, Asia felt only increased power from the reincarnation and a lingering drowsiness. Rias explained that the drowsiness was the only immediate effect and added that she was still working to make Issei part of her peerage and needed to catch up to his power. Issei, having recovered from Asia's display of charm, was talking with Kaneko nearby. Aquino said that they would be heading to the Gremory vacation home to train, since a raiding game was scheduled in a week and a half. Issei was eager to begin and activated a magic circle to transport them all. The group appeared at the base of a tall mountain in the underworld, the climb leading to the vacation home. Rias, with a teasingly stern look, ordered Issei to carry all the bags up the mountain for endurance training. Issei accepted without hesitation. When they reached the summit, the vacation home revealed itself as more of a mansion than a simple retreat. Issei arrived a moment later, collapsing to the ground and breathing heavily. He complained about the weight of the bags. Kaneko bluntly revealed that she used metal weights for training, which only made Issei look more pale. Kiba said he had packed feathers and extra clothes for the 9 days of training. Aquino made a playful, teasing remark, causing Issei to flush and become awkwardly flustered. They all moved into the main building to change into training clothes. When they emerged, Issei stood without a shirt, his scars visible as reminders of a difficult childhood. The sight made the others feel sympathy, though his confident presence lifted the atmosphere. He was also well-built and fit. Rias proposed that Issei practice speed training with Kiba, and he readily agreed, taking up a fighting stance. Issei and Kiba faced each other for a moment before vanishing and reappearing in a flash, clashing blades on geared arm. Issei taunted that Kiba would need more speed and strength, then delivered a sweeping strike that pushed Kiba back several meters. The two exchanged attacks in rapid succession. Issei built his power up to 10 boosts and launched a dragon shot. Kiba dodged to avoid the blast. The attack detonated in the distance in a burst of light that briefly painted the sky red before it returned to its usual purple hue. The spectacle of Issei's power unnerved everyone. 10 boosts produced a force that could level a mountain. Seeing that he could not match that output, Kiba conceded the bout and withdrew. Issei grinned and suggested they spar again near the end of training. Kiba, smiling in turn, accepted the idea of a future rematch. Rias asked how much power Issei had used. He disclosed that he had used 10 boosts and could reach a maximum of 50, at which point he could access Balance Breaker. The revelation surprised the group and prompted Rias to mutter that she was glad the White Dragon Emperor was not present. Issei admitted that he had already fought and defeated the White Dragon Emperor months earlier under unusual circumstances, and Rias reacted with a mix of astonishment and outrage before giving chase around the yard in a tumultuous display. Kaneko later asked Aquino when Rias would realize her feelings for Issei. Aquino speculated that it would happen after the raiding game. Kiba guessed it might occur during the later stages of training or during the raiding game itself. The three of them began making playful bets with small sums, teasing and laughing as they waited. Asia remained confused about the reason for the wagers. 8 days later, Rias gazed at the mountains and the night sky, trying to devise strategies to defeat Riser. She reviewed footage of those who had faced him before, but she knew the problem. Riser was not easily defeated unless he chose to allow it or was taken completely off guard. Issei appeared and examined the plans she had laid out. He suggested placing Kiba in either of 2 positions so he would have room to roam and make the most of his speed. Rias shrieked in surprise at his sudden arrival. Issei then recommended positioning Kaneko near the middle of the field so she could use her strength most effectively, and placing Aquino with Asia and Rias to provide the best artillery support. Rias studied Issei closely as he spoke. He wore a pair of reading glasses that made his slitted eyes look more striking. One eye was amber and the other emerald green. Rias found herself distracted by his presence and had trouble thinking clearly. Issei reviewed his adjustments, nodded, and then announced that he was going to transform into his dragon form. Rias stared at him in disbelief, and Issei insisted that he had another form. She asked if she could see it. Issei asked for a moment of privacy to prepare, excused himself briefly, and then began to change. His body expanded and shifted into a vast, majestic dragon. The dragon reached roughly 31 meters tall and 45 meters long, its scales a blend of red with brown and purple highlights. Golden yellow horns crowned its head, and its eyes shone a pure amber. Purple stripes and red spots traced patterns across its body, a likely result of the mingling of Draig's power with Issei's heritage. Rias reached out and touched the dragon's scales softly, awed to see a real dragon allow her to touch it. She thought of Dragon King Tanin, who seldom permitted her to touch him except when taking her to the young devil meetings, and how he sometimes looked sad. In dragon form, Issei told her that he had attained this form 3 days earlier. He explained that he could use it whenever he wished, but he had not yet learned how to activate his aura in that shape. When Rias asked what his aura entailed, Issei described it as a mixture of domination and blaze meteors. Rias mentioned that she knew a dragon king associated with the blaze meteor title. Issei asked the name of that dragon, since he had never met his true father and wondered if the dragon king might be him. Rias named Dragon King Tanin, the blaze meteor dragon. Issei considered that possibility and expressed a desire to meet him someday. Feeling sleepy, Rias asked if she could sleep under Issei's arm. Issei agreed, laid down on the ground, and lifted his arm to shelter her, using his warmth to keep her comfortable. They fell asleep that night thinking about the future and the challenges ahead. Issei waited in the occult research club room while the others returned from training a few minutes earlier. They believed they were ready for the raiding game against Riser Phoenix, and their mood was tense and determined. Issei remained behind, expecting Grafia to arrive because only she could authorize his participation as a helper to Rias. Rias had insisted Grafia was the one person who could grant that favor. Grafia arrived on time and explained the rules of the raiding game. She described that when a competitor was defeated, a blue aura would surround them and transport them to the infirmary where medics would heal them, and they would be eliminated from further participation. She emphasized that familiars could not be used to directly attack opponents and were limited to support roles. Using a familiar to strike an opponent would result in disqualification. Grafia clarified that the objective was to render an opponent unconscious. Causing a death would immediately stop the match and disqualify the responsible player and team. Finally, she reminded them that when a pawn entered the enemy base it could be promoted to any piece except the king. Grafia then asked if everyone understood the rules. Rias asked if she could add another person to her team, and Grafia said it depended on who the person would be. Rias proposed adding Issei Hayadu to her side in exchange for 8 pawn pieces. Grafia said she would consult Riser and stepped into a magic circle. Rias grew visibly nervous and perspired. Winning the match meant more than pride to her. Grafia returned after a short while and briefly played a test on Rias's reaction by saying Riser had denied the request, observing how Rias's expression fell when it seemed hope had been taken away. Grafia then reassured Rias and revealed that Riser had in fact allowed Issei to join her team. She announced that Issei Hayadu would be an honorary pawn of Rias Gremory, granted 8 pawn pieces. The room brightened at the news. Issei smiled with quiet confidence, and the peerage sensed his resolve to help Rias. He stretched his arms, legs, and back to prepare. His recent training had been with sword fighters, so he had not had many opportunities for close-quarters fighting. He approached Kiba and requested to borrow one of his swords, asking for the most balanced blade and for it to be adapted to ice. With preparations complete, the group was teleported to the arena to begin the raiding game. Inside the principal's office, Riser watched from his area of the arena. He knew Rias' headquarters would be in the ORC room, where she spent most of her days and nights. Riser ordered his servants to strike Rias' followers and teach them a lesson as he sent them out. In the occult research club room, Issei studied a map of the school and noted that Riser had taken position in the principal's office because its elevation made him feel powerful. Kiba asked where they should place their traps. Issei suggested setting traps in places where the intruders would be least suspicious and asked whether the enemy had ever faced a small peerage before. Aquino confirmed they had not, and observed that the opposition would probably underestimate them. Issei determined that Rias and Asia needed to stay together, since keeping Rias conscious would be decisive for victory or defeat. He said he had enough strength to defeat the opponent by himself but would need to boost his power, and he asked Drake how many boosts were possible. Drake huffed that while using the balance breaker Issei could boost at least 100 times before risking exhaustion, and without it he could boost about 50 times without strain. Issei concluded that he could boost his allies' strength and power throughout the match without immediately reaching his limit, but he warned that boosts should be applied in small increments to avoid overtaxing them. The group nodded and moved forward to set the plan based on Issei's suggestions. Grafia announced that the allotted time for each team had ended and that the teams could now explore and attack. Issei rushed off with Kaneko, urging them to move. The group split. Kiba stayed near the base with Rias and Asia while Aquino trailed Issei and Kaneko to follow the plan he had set. Issei and Kaneko continued down the path to the gym and took cover behind its stage. Issei asked if Kaneko was ready, worried. Kaneko answered bluntly that she was as ready as she could be. A woman demanded that they come out, confident she knew they were there. Issei signaled that they should press the attack, and Kaneko nodded. They stepped out from behind the stage. Issei saw 4 opponents. A woman who seemed to be a queen rook, 2 children, and another girl wielding a staff with orbs on each end. The queen wore a traditional Chinese-style dress that fit closely, but Issei kept his focus on the fight and the surprising presence of the children. He asked who the children were. One of the children announced her name as Il and insisted she was not a child. The other introduced herself as Il and said the same. Issei, puzzled, asked their ages, unintentionally taunting them. The children opened their bags and revealed chainsaws powered by magic. They declared in unison that they would make Issei pay for looking down on them and lunged forward. Issei activated his boosted gear and blocked their charge. The staff-wielding girl surged at him while he used his newly formed tail to parry attacks from multiple opponents. Issei grinned and moved to engage the children directly. Kaneko traded blows with the rook. The rook admitted surprise that someone so small could be so strong. Kaneko replied with a calm statement that she did not care about strength and that she would save Rias. They exchanged strikes and quick remarks until Kaneko landed a heavy hit that staggered the rook. Issei managed to incapacitate the Qipao-clad fighter and focused on the children, who seemed the greater threat. He chastised them for using dangerous weapons. They retorted that they already knew the rules. Using a single boost, Issei slipped behind one child and delivered a precise strike that rendered the child unconscious. The other child turned toward him and was driven back by a powerful blow that left her unable to continue. Issei then turned and saw Kaneko dealing the finishing blow to the remaining rook. She looked back at him with amusement and asked if that had been part of the plan. Issei admitted it had not, but pointed out that they should leave because Aquino would arrive soon. He picked up the unconscious opponent and ran for the exit. As they moved out of the building, the rook pushed herself up and demanded that they stay and fight. Issei replied that he would love to continue, but she was already defeated. Before she could respond further, a storm gathered overhead. Aquino appeared in the air with her hand raised, expressing delight at seeing her opponents cornered, and released a powerful burst of energy that struck the building. The structure collapsed in a dramatic, explosive display of power, and the rook and 3 pawns were incapacitated. Aquino then stepped back to recover her strength. Issei gave a thumbs up and moved away from the wreckage. Grafia's intercom announced that 1 rook and 3 pawns of Riser Phoenix had been defeated. Issei celebrated that 4 opponents were down and that 11 remained. Kaneko warned him not to lower his guard. As they continued walking, Issei noticed something at the last second and shoved Kaneko out of the way. He was engulfed by an explosion. Kaneko cried out Issei's name. As the dust cloud cleared, Issei's draconic form towered over the scene and Kaneko watched with a mixture of fear and relief that he had not been taken out so early. The dragon stood roughly 10 meters tall with brownish-purple coloring. This was not Issei's full 4-legged dragon seen in training. This was his battle-ready form. The dragon turned toward the Bomb Queen and opened its mouth. The Bomb Queen called out in stunned disbelief that she should have defeated him with her blast. Issei unleashed a draconic roar. A concentrated blast formed in his maw and struck the bomb queen, knocking her back and leaving her stunned and badly shaken. Yubaluna mentally noted that he should have shown signs of injury from the attack, yet he remained standing. Issei then focused on Kaneko and extended a hand toward her. He offered her a ride, and Kaneko reacted with happiness that he was all right. Issei, embarrassed, remarked that he would always be fine and that the attack had barely bothered him. Kaneko insisted they move to take down the rest of Riser's peerage, and Issei's draconic form chuckled before heading toward the school's track and field area. Dragon's Territory, Underworld. A purple dragonoid observed a recording of the brown and purple-scaled youth taking down the bomb queen with ease. The dragonoid noted that the young dragon had finally appeared and moved to inform Surzex. Kuo Academy, raiding game dimension. Issei and Kaneko linked up with Kiba as they entered the track and field. Kiba expressed awe at Issei's transformation into that battle form. Issei assured him that he would defeat their opponents. Kiba and Kaneko nodded, and they moved toward the main school building to meet Rias. Kiba and Kaneko questioned Rias about her presence. Rias explained that they had run out of options, that Akino had been seen fighting the bomb queen, and that Issei had been engaging the rest of Riser's peerage. Rias said she needed to take on Riser immediately. Kiba pledged to defend her alongside Kaneko. At the track and field, a blonde girl with drill-like ponytails taunted the dragon, calling him a disgusting dragon and challenging him. Issei replied that he would fight them, though he suggested they were mistaken to expect victory. The blonde girl whined at the response and demanded clarification. Issei clarified that he intended to fight them all, and that did not mean they would win. As his power surged, his aura shot into the dimension's sky. Riser sensed the rising power and noted that it already surpassed his little sister's and was approaching his own level very quickly. Riser taunted Rias, asking whether she had convinced the dragon to fight for her or merely asked him. Rias calmly replied that she had only asked for help and that he volunteered to assist. Riser dismissed the point and arrogantly declared that he would win and claim victory over her. Before the battle could begin, Grafia used the intercom to announce that both queens had been defeated in their respective matchups. Rias reacted with sadness over Akino's loss. Kiba and Kaneko were surprised that Akino had not won, and Kaneko remembered that Issei had left Akino exhausted. Riser mocked that Yubaluna would gain nothing that night. Back at the track and field, Issei stood at full power and surveyed Riser's servants below, confident that they had no chance. The blonde girl insisted that Issei could not be stronger than her brother and urged the bishops and rooks to attack. The pawns tried to climb the dragon's tail to reach his eyes but were easily swatted off and sent into the path of the bishops' and rooks' attacks. The system announced that 2 of Riser's pawns had been defeated. Issei stomped on one of the rooks, knocking it out of the game, and the system confirmed that a rook had been defeated. Issei then blasted another rook with concentrated fire and magma energy, ending that service as well, and the system registered another rook defeat. Issei prepared a powerful blast against multiple servants. The blonde girl shouted for her allies to move and dodged an attack that took out 2 knights, and the system announced the defeat of 2 knights. Grafia reported those defeats. The blonde girl rose and placed her hands in the air, then stepped toward the school's wall and surrendered. Once she surrendered, Issei climbed to the roof of the school building. A brief quiet followed as the teams regrouped and prepared for the next phase of the match. Roof of the main school building 2 minutes earlier. Rias launched another blast toward Riser while Kiba and Kaneko attacked from the sides. Riser dodged them carefully because they could halt his regeneration. Riser taunted that they were going to lose. Rias shouted that they would not give in. Kiba attacked from behind, but Riser grabbed his neck and threw him toward Rias, and Kaneko struck Riser and sent him flying to the edge of the roof. Kaneko jumped back to Rias as Riser rose, towering with visible anger and frustration. Grafia announced over the intercom that 2 pawns of Riser Phoenix had been defeated, that 1 rook, 2 knights, and a bishop had been defeated, and that Riser's last bishop had surrendered and been taken out of the game. Rias taunted Riser about his supposed victory. Riser proclaimed that he was immortal and could not be defeated by them. As he screamed, a huge presence slowly rose behind him, and he teetered on the edge of losing control in a way that could disqualify him from the game. He recomposed himself and declared that, with his peerage defeated, he would have to go all out. As he powered up, he was slammed into the building. Issei then leaped in, calling Riser a puny bird as he struck him. Riser emerged battered and looking at Issei's draconic form in disbelief, insisting that a dragon should not be here. Issei acknowledged that he heard that a lot and then struck Riser, sending him flying. Riser was enveloped in a blue light and struck with overwhelming force that left him severely incapacitated. Grafia announced over the intercom that Riser Phoenix had been defeated and that Rias Gremory had won. As Issei allowed his body to shrink back to human form, wounds and old scars were visible across his upper body. His shirt had been removed and his scars showed the marks of long-ago suffering. The most striking were the wounds on his wings, which bore the marks of attempts to sever them. The group was so shocked by his appearance that they nearly missed when he collapsed and passed out. Rias ran over and cradled his head in her lap, placing her fingers at his throat to check for a pulse. When she felt the pulse, she breathed a sigh of relief and let him rest against her. 3 days later, Issei was outside, recovering from the energy he had expended, while the others celebrated in a party room at the Gremory household for Rias's first ungifted rating game victory. Rias reflected that Riser had fought with both intelligence and arrogance, and that she had to keep growing stronger to be a proper leader. She was standing near the sleeping Issei when a distant roar sounded. Rias recognized the roar as Tannen's. She informed her parents and brother, and they all went outside in time to see a large purple dragon with a yellow underbelly land near the sleeping Issei in dragon form. Surzex greeted Tannen, and Tannen asked how they had found his lost son. Surzex replied that Rias had found him. Tannen asked Rias how she had found him, and Rias explained that she had found him in the human world and that his life there had not been good. Tannen asked what had happened while Issei had been there. Rias explained that he had been abused by his human parents and later rescued by the Murayama family, and that she had learned of him during his second year at Kuo Academy. Tannen said that his son had been kidnapped from the underworld about 9 years ago. Rias noted that the blood work showed Issei to be a human-dragon hybrid, and Tannen explained that a stray devil had taken his wife's egg to the human world and that human DNA had likely been mixed in to mask the child's origin. Issei woke, sensing an unfamiliar but strangely familiar presence. Groggy and confused, he asked what had happened and who the dragon was. Surzex identified the dragon as Tannen, the Blaze Meteor Dragon King, and mentioned that Tannen was apparently Issei's father. Issei stared at the dragon, then impulsively punched the dragon in the stomach before throwing his arms around him in an emotional embrace. Tannen was startled by the punch but reciprocated the hug. Issei, tearing up, told Tannen that he had needed him all those years. Gears recognized Issei as a human and gave him the boosted gear. Tannen had said his egg was taken 9 years earlier, which meant Issei had been around 8 at the time. Neglect and harsh treatment during that PRD had stunted his growth. Issei cried in his father's arms and asked where he had been when he needed him. Tannen answered that he could not go into the human world because his presence would frighten people and he would be distracted trying to make them leave him alone. They continued talking while the others went inside the main building of the Gremory family home to start dinner. Aquino wondered aloud to Mr. Gremory whether Issei would be okay. Mr. Gremory said Issei would be fine, but mentioned a development in the underworld that had followed the raiding game the day before. The Gremory matriarch then drew the attention of the small peerage by noting that many were outraged that Rias had brought a dragon onto her team, and that it was the red dragon of domination. Rias grew uneasy and explained that Issei had not been recruited in the usual way. He had assisted her in freeing her and wished to join her peerage, but he was too powerful. She added that his draconic form was the strongest version of himself, far surpassing his human form, and that he could hide his draconic features with practice and focus. Her father asked if he was aware of that ability, and Aquino reacted with disbelief that Issei could have avoided some of his suffering by concealing his features. Rias said she doubted he knew how to do that because his parents had abused him from birth. When her father asked whether his parents were Tannen and Petunia, Kiba clarified that Issei had said he was born to a human mother and a dragon father. Rias' father acknowledged that the revelation complicated matters, noting that some viewed such parentage as taboo. Rias defended Issei as a kind boy who had only ever wanted love and had never received it from his human parents. Kaneko bluntly stated that Issei's human parents were in prison for their abuse and would never be allowed back into society. Rias' father asked if it was possible to reincarnate Issei as a devil, and Rias explained that the only way would be with a piece from a higher-ranked devil and at least 8 pawns, 2 of which would need to be mutated. She had only 8 regular pawns. Venelana asked how Rias had come to know Issei. Rias described how she had first noticed him after he had been attacked by the fallen angel Rainier, and how he had overpowered and defeated her without needing to use any special power. They had met the next day and become close allies, and Rias admitted she had developed strong feelings for him. Venelana reacted with delighted teasing, and Rias protested as their father reminded them to focus on getting Issei into Rias' peerage before someone else tried to take that opportunity. Venelana suggested asking Rias' brother for help. Surzex arrived, and Rias asked him for a couple of mutated pawns so she could reincarnate Issei. Surzex replied that he could ask Ajuka to create 2 mutated pieces, but it would cost Issei something. He explained that Ajuka wanted to perform experiments to determine how much power would be required to reincarnate Issei and to measure how strong Issei truly was, since his performance in the rating game suggested power beyond Riser and approaching ultimate class levels. Rias resolved to inform Issei the next day and to give him as much time with his father as possible. She wanted him to rest and train so he could become as strong as possible. She stood looking out the window as Issei and his father flew together across the sky. In the sky, Issei flew with his father as they bonded over events from the 17 years of Issei's life. Issei asked if his father knew that he had been born from a human woman. Tannen replied that he did not know, guessing it must have happened when he had been drunk in a human form, and he regretted not remembering that night. They continued to fly and stare at the distant sunset, which looked beautiful in the same way Issei had always seen it in the human world. In this realm the sun had a surprising purple hue and the sky was perpetually red, only turning black at night. Issei asked if there was a way to become a devil and serve Rias Gremry. Tannen explained that the last time he had checked, Issei would need to see Ajuka Beelzebub to become part of someone much weaker than himself, though Tannen suspected Surzex would inform Ajuka of Issei's wish to serve his sister. Issei said that ever since he was a child he had wanted to become a hero, someone who saved others. He described a small childhood game he had played with a girl once and how it left a lasting impression, and he said he wished to be a hero for devils and the supernatural world alike, a symbol of peace and calm. Tannen asked if Issei meant a symbol of peace. Issei affirmed that he meant both peace and calm, staring at the sunset. Tannen said he was proud of the person Issei had become and credited Drake for guiding him as a dragon of domination and a force for balance, and then expressed pride in calling Issei his son. He admitted he could not comprehend the pain Issei had endured and hoped Issei could forgive him for not rescuing him earlier. Issei reassured his father that he had been sad that Tannen had not come sooner, but now understood why. He said he had been saved by a human girl named Murayama, who had rescued him from an abusive home. Tannen teased about wanting a daughter-in-law, and Issei clarified that Murayama was a lesbian who loved her friend Kates, adding that his own affections were complicated but heartfelt. Tannen laughed and urged Issei to continue defending his future king and mate in Rias Gremry, teasing him about the looks he had given her. Issei asked if he would ever see his father again. Tannen said Issei would need to come for the young devil meeting since Rias was a young devil, and promised to train him hard, warning Issei that he would come to regret knowing him. Tannen ruffled Issei's hair. Not long after, Rias and the others emerged to see Issei and Tannen landing as Tannen bade farewell. Rias asked how the reunion had gone. Issei said it had been nice to finally meet a parent who treated him kindly and that he hoped to visit the underworld more often to spend time with his father. He then shifted into his human form, though the draconic features remained visible enough for Rias to comment. Rias observed that Issei could have avoided being bullied and abused by hiding his features. Issei answered that he had tried to hide them for as long as he could, but some features were permanent. Rias said it would be best to return to the human world and get back to work. She created a magic circle, and as the group entered it, Issei used some of his power to help with the teleportation. They vanished and reappeared in the occult research club room as the others began to celebrate their victory over the seemingly immortal Riser Phoenix. Meanwhile, in a shadowed corner of Kuo Town, a priest stood smiling in a way that could haunt dreams. Beside him stood a man in ornate holy robes that suggested archangelic garb, and another man with 5 sets of black wings and pointed ears like an elf, his eyes a striking red and a cold smile on his face as he dropped 4 weapons before the excommunicated archbishop. The excommunicated archbishop declared that with those swords they could restart the war between the 3 factions and strike against those who had grown complacent. A figure cloaked in shadow spoke quietly that they should remember their bargain and requested that Asia be returned. Kokabeel, the winged man, assured the shadowed figure that he would keep his promise. Kokabeel added that he never broke his word and that, in return, he intended to challenge the Red Dragon Emperor of the current generation. He laughed as he walked away, saying he was ready to push the world toward chaos. Issei walked to school from Murayama's home, thinking about the conversation with his father in the underworld. He wanted to train with his father, but his father had said he would wait until Issei had an education so he could survive in both the human and devil worlds. As Issei passed through the school gates, he watched students talking and laughing with one another. He went to his first class of the day, still turning over everything that had happened so far. Time skipped to the end of the day. Issei entered the occult research club room and looked for the others. Most of the group were seated and attending to their devil-related duties. Kaneko was the only one not busy, quietly eating sweets. Issei found it endearing and petted her on the head. Kaneko noticed his presence and leaned into the touch. Drake asked what Issei planned to do that day. Issei told the dragon he had intended to help the others with their work, but it seemed they did not need him. Drake suggested they continue their training tomorrow, and Issei agreed while warning not to blame him if he overdid it. After finishing with Kaneko, Issei rose and left with a wave. He managed not to distract the others, though Kaneko still seemed to want more head pats. On his way home he encountered Fried Selzen in the midst of an attack on a priest. Issei watched with a bored expression as Fried greeted him, surprised to see a hybrid. Issei asked politely if he could be on his way, but Fried refused and lunged. Issei reacted swiftly, striking Fried with a tail blow that sent the man sprawling and rendered him unconscious. Suspecting Fried might be hiding something, Issei took the sword Fried had been carrying, checked the man's overcoat for other weapons, and found 2 more blades. He secured the blades within his sacred gear and immobilized Fried's left leg to prevent him from giving chase before leaving. Back at home, Issei found Asia and Murayama sitting on the couch watching television. He slipped into his room to hide the swords out of sight. He did not want anyone discovering them. The next morning, Issei accidentally walked in on Asia in the bathroom. Both were embarrassed. Issei apologized and left quickly to give her privacy. At breakfast, Asia sat expectantly while Issei tried to steady his flustered mind. Murayama teased them gently by asking what had happened in the bathroom, which only deepened Issei's blush. Asia explained that Issei had apologized as soon as he realized she was there and that he had left. She had been a little disappointed but recognized his awkwardness. Murayama observed that Issei was inexperienced with those kinds of situations and advised patience and understanding. Issei took a cold shower to calm himself and collect his thoughts. Sometime later, Issei and Asia were walking to school when they noticed 2 people in white cloaks talking to Sona. As they passed, Issei noticed that one of them had deep violet eyes. He entered his classroom with a pained expression, which the other girls immediately noticed. The girls spoke with Asia about their days, while Asia kept to herself about an embarrassing incident from earlier that morning. As the day went on, Issei noticed that the student council members looked increasingly worried. When he and Asia entered the occult research club room, Issei sat down beside Kaneko, who was calmly eating snacks and drinking tea. The presence of the 2 cloaked figures was felt by the devils before they entered, and Issei looked toward the doors to find the same pair from that morning accompanied by Sona. The cloaked woman on the right spoke with a serious tone to confirm whether this clubroom was the place where Rias Gremory carried out her devil-related activities. The other woman seemed nervous but upbeat. Issei stood and moved off the couch, leaning against the wall beside Kiba, who wore a face of sudden, intense anger that puzzled Issei. Kiba explained that they were exorcists and that they were wielding holy swords that he had formerly promised to destroy. Issei silently showed Kiba his phone and indicated secrecy. When Kiba saw the images, he recognized 3 other swords matching the presence he had sensed and messaged Issei, asking how he had acquired them. Issei explained that he had run into Fried while walking home the previous day. Fried had carried one of the swords and Issei had taken them from him and placed the swords at the Murayama residence, where he was staying. Kiba replied that he would follow Issei's lead. The exorcists said they had been sent to collect the holy sword fragments of Excalibur and return them to the Vatican. Their purpose made the student council visibly tense, and Kiba remained curiously quiet in the room, the presence of Excalibur fragments seeming to stir something inside him. Before the exorcists left, the blue-haired one stepped toward Asia and asked if she was the excommunicated saint. Asia, frightened, confirmed that she was. The exorcist asked if Asia still prayed, and Asia nodded. The exorcist then raised her sword as if preparing to strike in order to force Asia back into heaven's graces. Issei moved in front of Asia, his eyes taking on a dangerous, reptilian gleam. The exorcist questioned why the Red Dragon Emperor would side with devils. Issei explained that he remained near these devils because they were more tolerable than many others and he had chosen to stay. He added that this territory was where he was born, and then revealed his draconic heritage by unfurling his wings to emphasize that he would defend what he considered his. The exorcist left after a tense exchange, and Kiba's expression folded between melancholy and warning. Rias asked why Issei and Kiba had been so quiet during the confrontation. Issei admitted that he had found the swords the exorcists sought and recounted how Fried had attacked him and how he had taken the swords and stored them at Murayama's. Rias brightened at the news. They all followed Issei to the Murayama home, and Issei produced the 3 swords he had taken from the church. Kiba stepped forward and, after a tense moment in which he focused his power, struck one of the swords and shattered it in a dramatic, anime-style burst of energy that released his pent-up aggression. The destruction was swift and non-graphic. Once the sword was destroyed, the exorcists were informed that the remaining fragments would be turned over, and they prepared to leave the area. After the exorcists departed, Issei and Asia spent a while at Murayama's home. Later, Murayama breezed into the room, cheerfully announcing plans to watch an episode of a show with them, and noticed that Issei and Asia had been sitting awkwardly close. Murayama smiled and left them some privacy. Issei politely moved Asia out of the room, and they parted for the night. That evening Issei thought about Rias's warning from the meeting. There was a far greater threat looming. A powerful figure named Kokabeel had emerged, a fallen angel cadre whose strength rivaled the archangels of heaven and the super devils of hell. Kokabeel had survived the Great War between the 3 factions, and his power made him a threat on a scale Issei had never faced before. Issei felt the weight of what would come and realized he would have to prepare for a battle that might test him like never before. Issei found himself in a white space with flames liking at the edges, and he looked up to see Drake watching him with amusement. Issei insisted that his relationship with Asia was not what Drake implied, his face flushing in embarrassment. Drake teased that no matter how Issei protested, he would remain unconvinced because of Issei's expression. Issei asked, uncertain, whether Asia truly returned his feelings. Drake replied that he believed she cared for Issei and urged him to give her a chance. He also warned that Issei's draconic power tended to draw attention from others. Drake then sent Issei back out of his mindscape. Issei woke up staring at the ceiling of his room and muttered a curse under his breath as he prepared to search for the exorcists. He found them scraping together money for a meal. Being generous, he bought them food. As they ate, the exorcists demanded to know why he seemed to be friendly with the devils. Issei explained that he was neutral and looking for a way to be a bridge between sides, and that he would not interfere so long as those he protected were kept safe. He suggested that Kiba try destroying one of the holy swords to vent his anger. When asked why Kiba would want to do that, Issei reminded them that Kiba had been part of the Holy Sword Project and was its sole survivor. Zenobia agreed that if Kiba could destroy a sword and they could recover its pieces to rebuild it, that would be acceptable. When Irina asked how he planned to find the swords, Issei revealed that he already had them. He explained that he had tracked down the thief and taken the swords back, keeping them hidden under his bed. They arranged to meet at the Occult Research Club to transfer the pieces if Kiba succeeded in breaking a blade. At the club, Kiba prepared his best sword for the attempt. Issei placed 3 swords on the floor while Zenobia and Irina secured the most unstable ones in a pocket dimension with Durandal. Kiba set Excalibur rapidly on the ground and struck it repeatedly, channeling all his strength, but the blade did not yield. In a swift move, Issei slammed into the sword, causing a crack that gave Kiba the opening he needed. Kiba struck with everything he had. The sword shattered into many pieces and his own weapon broke in the process. They exchanged a nod of mutual respect. Through the window, someone was seen, approaching at tremendous speed. A figure burst through the wall in a dramatic crash, sending everyone sprawling. The newcomer's fury was unmistakable. Rias challenged him, and the man revealed himself as Kokobile, explaining that he had come to retrieve something he believed was rightfully his. Drake warned Kokobile to leave or face defeat, and Kokobile scoffed at the idea that Issei could stand against him. Issei, drawing on his resolve and the threat of his juggernaut drive, told Kokobile to leave before he was forced to fight. Kokobile declared that he lived for battle and launched a glowing spear at the group, destroying the building and scattering everyone in a burst of anime-style combat energy. Amid the smoke and debris, Issei stood, his shirt torn and his scars visible. He called out to Kokobile to confirm whether he truly intended to fight. Kokobile affirmed that he did. Kokobile proclaimed that he lived for battle and that by attacking now he was initiating the Second Great War between the factions. He flew straight at Issei and began to grow in size. As Kokobile's fist came down, Issei shifted into his hybrid form and met the blow, taunting that it had stung him. He kicked Kokobile into the air, appeared behind him and slammed him into the ground with an axe slam. Kokobile emerged from the impact seemingly unscathed but smirked and noted that much of Issei's strength had been shown, adding that he had only been going easy on the red dragon. He began to charge a blast in his hand. Issei shot back that Kokobile should get serious or he would be damaged before he could reveal his full power. Light energy engulfed Issei briefly, but he used his draconic scales to push through the attack, reappeared in front of Kokobile and struck him in the face. Kokobile staggered, then was grabbed by Issei and thrown into the school building before crashing into the ground and creating a crater. Issei pulled Kokobile from the crater with a grin and joked that he would plant a giant tree, then slammed Kokobile into the ground with such force that the earth split and nearby buildings slid into the chasm as water began to seep in. Kokobile emerged from the fissure, annoyed by the taunt, and counterattacked. Their powers clashed as they punched, kicked and blasted each other, sweeping into the sky in a prolonged aerial exchange. The momentum shifted when Issei landed a brutal headbutt that sent Kokobile crashing into the ground and creating another crater. Issei readied himself for another strike while Kokobile formed a light spear, but the spear passed harmlessly as Issei's fist bore down on him. Kokobile saw a massive, gleaming fist bearing the word, death, as it descended. He tried to block, but the impact overwhelmed his guard. His arms buckled under the force and the blow sent him hurtling into the sky. Issei planted his feet on the fractured ground and gathered a terrifying amount of power in his left hand, an exertion so extreme it threatened the planet's balance. From his height in the sky, Kokobile watched a red light grow and swell beneath the blackness of space. He resolved to answer with his own ultimate technique and began forming the largest light spear he had ever created. The red light continued to enlarge and glow ominously. Drake reminded Issei that using such power would demand a major commitment from his body, and he urged the red dragon to give everything. Together, Issei and Drake unleashed their combined technique, known as Explosive Burning Blaster Dragon Shot. The beam surged into the sky and met Kokobile's colossal light spear. The two attacks collided in a cataclysmic explosion. When the smoke cleared, a crimson drive of energy pushed through the cloud and struck Kokobile. The force engulfed him and flung him outward, propelling him through the atmosphere and sending him hurtling toward the sun. Kokobile shouted that he could survive, but the sun's overwhelming heat overtook his escape, His form disintegrated and was carried away on the solar winds until nothing remained. Back on Earth, Issei panted, exhausted and weakened from the exertion. He lifted a fist in triumph for a moment, then collapsed and passed out. Aquino asked aloud whether they were placing too much weight on Issei's shoulders. Rias admitted that they needed to reconsider their strategy. She confessed that she had trouble recruiting Issei but that seeing his power had left her unexpectedly moved. Aquino laughed softly at Rias's reaction, and then went to move Issei to a safer area so he could rest away from the battlefield. Rias asked her not to tell anyone, and Aquino promised to keep it quiet for now while urging that Issei be tended to before anyone else could interfere. A brilliant white light appeared from the sky and descended beside Issei. Albion's host lifted his fist and expressed surprise at how strong the Red Dragon Emperor form had become for a human, declaring that their future fight would be legendary. Draig greeted Albion, and Albion asked after Draig's new host. Draig explained that he had trained Issei since he was 6, that Issei had endured much and possessed the heart of a hero and the power of a warrior. Albion insisted that their duel should not take place on this field, calling it dishonorable. He requested a proper contest when Issei could fight at full strength. Draig agreed, and Albion and his host departed. With the White Dragon Emperor gone, everyone on the battlefield was left wondering where and when the two dragons would meet again. It had been a few days since the arrival of the White Dragon Emperor. Issei spent his time training, trying to devise a way to defeat him. He did not yet have a plan, but he felt the confrontation would come soon. His intensive practice paid off, and over the next few days he grew many times stronger. On his way to school he sensed a familiar power nearby and, spotting its source, narrowly avoided an attack from above. A young man landed nearby and introduced himself as Valle, boasting that he would be the strongest dragon emperor of both heavenly dragon hosts and taunting Issei by calling him Red One. Issei returned the introduction and said he intended to become the strongest Red Dragon Emperor and would prefer friendship to enmity. Valle replied that he simply sought strong opponents and then took flight, disappointed by the competition. Rias and the others arrived, and Rias demanded to know what Valle was doing. Valle answered that he was sizing up the competition and flew away. Draig, speaking through Issei, remarked that they might never get a clear read on Valle because he was a battle-hungry young man. Issei decided to get to class because it was Parents' Day, and he did not want to miss seeing who would come. The day went smoothly until Tannen arrived in his human form, wearing a purple dress shirt, tan pants, and a black overcoat, his purple hair slicked back. Issei could not help but notice his father flirting with some of the mothers present. He sighed, remembering his father's womanizing ways. Issei kept to himself and worked on a piece of clay, shaping and painting a small model that resembled his draconic form in miniature, using purple and red to match its colors. Later, in the gymnasium, Issei walked with his father and caught up on some needed conversation. Tannen remarked that he was glad Issei had come out of a recent dangerous situation unhurt. Issei smiled and then noticed Rias and her peerage heading toward the occult research club room. He parted from his father to join his friends. At the clubroom door they prepared to open a sealed room. Rias explained that the room belonged to her second bishop, Gaspar Vladi, and they were about to free him. Issei excitedly helped open the door. Inside, they found a coffin and a small boy peering through the cracks in fear. Rias presented the boy as Gaspar Vladi and left the group to speak to him. As Issei approached, time seemed to slow for everyone except him. The boy moved from the coffin to a small box and trembled violently. Gaspar watched Issei carefully, unsure if he was a threat. Issei sat beside the box and reached out his hand slowly in a non-threatening gesture. Gaspar flinched, expecting violence, but instead felt Issei gently rest a hand on his head and slide it. The simple, kind action calmed Gaspar and he leaned into the touch, trusting the gesture because it carried no ulterior motive. When Issei judged Gaspar ready, he told the others he would stay with him, and they left, closing the door. In the dimness, Gaspar peeked out of his box and Issei offered a small smile and a greeting. He told Gaspar that Surzex had believed Rias was ready to let him out into the world and asked if Gaspar wished to prove that decision right. Gaspar admitted he was terrified of leaving the room. Issei reassured him that it was okay to be afraid of people and that he understood because he had been mocked for being a half-breed. He explained that as a human-dragon hybrid he had often been made to feel out of place and recalled being mistreated from a very young age. Issei explained that he had been born with draconic features and suffered severe abuse from his human family. They had beaten him and left him to fend for himself until a young girl saved him. Issei identified her as Murayama Star, a leader of the Kendo Club, who learned of his situation from his friends Matsuda and Motohama and went to his home to help. For a long time he had lived in fear that speaking up would mean death, but he survived because Murayama and his two loyal friends helped keep him sane. He added that he had only recently met his biological father, who turned out to be the Dragon King Tannen. Gasper reacted with excitement at the name Tannen, and Issei tempered that excitement by saying that, while Tannen was indeed powerful, he himself still had a long way to go before reaching that level. Issei shared that he understood being afraid of others and admitted he was too shy even to ask Rias out on a date, partly because of how a past encounter with Rainier had ended. He had hoped someone might return his feelings, but Rainier had manipulated him and intended to harm him. Issei had managed to stop her before she could succeed. Issei told Gasper that he needed to push himself out of his comfort zone to support his peerage and protect the people he cared about. He warned that failing to act when it mattered could cost lives and that sometimes one had to become a monster to save others. As he rose to leave, a small hand caught his sleeve. Issei turned to see Gasper looking up at him with tears and a firm determination to do right and make him proud. Gasper vowed to try his best. Issei praised his attitude and explained that Gasper would need to increase his strength and speed to make his sacred gear stronger. Becoming physically stronger would help him control it. Issei took Gasper outside near the ORC building for training. As they sparred, Rias and the others noticed them. Rias smiled at Gasper's effort to catch Issei off guard and was pleased to see him overcoming his fear of leaving his room. She returned to her paperwork for the meeting later that night. While sparring, both boys sensed a presence in the nearby bushes. A man stepped forward and identified himself as Fallen, saying he had been observing and that he was there because of an upcoming meeting between three factions. Fallen warned Issei that at his current level he would not be able to defeat him, but he praised the work Issei was doing with Gasper and suggested that Gasper might grow stronger by drawing on Issei's power, though they would not pursue that now. Gasper protested through tears and Issei reassured him. Fallen said he would meet Issei at the scheduled meeting and then departed. Issei shrugged and the two resumed their training. Later, Issei walked to Akino's shrine because one of the leaders of heaven wanted to speak with him. At the top of the shrine stairs he found Akino dressed in her shrine maiden attire. He found her beautiful in her own way and was open to the complexities of their relationships. Inside the shrine, Akino revealed that she had been born a half-breed of a fallen and a human. She recounted that her mother had been killed when she was small because of her father's actions, and that she had run away to survive the night. Not long after, she had met Rias, who had made her the queen of the peerage. Issei told Akino that he thought she was beautiful as she was and that what mattered most was the kind of person she was. He asked if she cared for her friends, and Akino affirmed that she did. He then asked if she wished to harm them, and Akino firmly denied it. Issei told Akino that she was not an abomination but severely hurt because her father had failed to protect her and her mother. He urged her to see things from his perspective. He had been called away at the worst possible moment because a friend and leader he had known his whole life had been ambushed by devils and begged for backup. He had not been able to abandon that friend. From Akino's point of view, Issei acknowledged he understood why she hated him. He had not been there when she needed him until after her mother was already gone. Issei insisted that her father had regretted the choice to help Azazel from the moment he learned his wife had been killed while he was away. He emphasized that the father loved Akino as she was, that she was all he had left, and that he did not want to lose her too. Issei explained that the father's distance had been meant to give Akino space and time to reflect and, at some point, forgive. He was trying to become the father she needed, even if he had failed to be the father she wanted. Issei finished speaking as a white light appeared in the shrine. A man requested that Mrs. Akino leave them. Akino smiled, told him she would see him later, and walked away. Issei asked what had brought one of heaven's leaders to see him. The man introduced himself as Michael, the leader of heaven, and said that Issei's display of power during the fight with Kokobile had prompted him to offer a gift. Michael praised Issei's power, strength, and bravery facing an opponent who had fought in the Great War and offered a weapon to aid him in battle. Michael presented the legendary sword Ascalon, a blade famed for slaying a rampaging dragon in St. George's time, and expressed the hope that Issei could use its power to his advantage. Issei examined the weapon and found it felt unusually powerful, and he asked why a dragon-slaying weapon would be given to a dragon. Michael explained that Issei was the only one who could wield the blade without being harmed. The weapon could sense the user's pain and dreams and would strive to help make those dreams come true. Michael said he had to attend a meeting in a few hours and then disappeared in a white light. Issei, amused and still in disbelief, reflected that he had met one of the leaders of the three factions without being smitten and felt the day had turned out remarkably well. As he walked home, he realized he was being followed. Looking over his shoulder, he found someone he never thought he would see again and, a little scared, told the person that he had thought they were in prison. Issei and Asia navigated the growing tension between them with care, and Issei began training that continued even in his sleep as he worked to unlock his balance breaker to face Kokobile at full strength. He later welcomed Zenobia into his circle, and the group prepared to locate the exorcists while remaining alert for an early attack from Kokobile. The allies braced for the coming confrontation as the story moved into the next chapter. He thought it was really cool and added a couple of lines from his favorite piece by the YouTube group Team 4-Star. He loved their Cooler's Revenge for its hilarious lines that played against a powerful scene between Cooler and Goku. He included most of their lines, leaving out one that did not fit the tone. Kokobile did not use Goku's lines and spoke only with Cooler's voice. The detailed account of Issei forcing Kokobile into SBMsen and casting him toward the sun was removed from their record. The DBZ reference remained as a show or manga existing within the same universe. The next chapter would cover the parents' visit and the meeting with the faction heads. Issei stood across from the last person he ever wanted to see, his human mother, Miki Hayato. She had somehow escaped from prison, and Issei drew himself up and adopted a fighting stance while demanding how she had gotten free. Miki answered with a smug laugh, claiming the staff had been easily fooled when she showed remorse and that she had been allowed to leave. She added that she could do it again if she had to. Issei warned that if she did not return to custody, he would end her. Miki reacted with disbelief and mocking laughter, reminding him that she had raised him better than that. Issei closed the distance in an instant, meeting her eyes with a cold declaration that he would give her one last chance to go back and admit she had lied, or he would erase her existence. Miki only shrugged and taunted him, insisting she had been set free by the staff and that she had expected him to react exactly as he was. Issei realized his breathing was fast and that the image of his mother seemed to blur and multiply. He demanded to know what she had done to him. Miki replied that she was doing whatever she deemed necessary to rein him in. Issei lunged forward, determined not to be deceived. His arm passed through the space where she had been as if she were an illusion, and he felt the blunt resistance of wood. Pulling his arm free, he found that he had moved it into the trunk of a tree. He staggered back, trying to clear his head and make sense of the hallucination. He resolved it must have been a trick of the mind and pushed his concern aside as he made his way toward school. Unseen by Issei, Miki crouched behind the tree, clutching her chest and showing signs of having been hurt, but without any graphic detail. Issei passed through the school gates unaware and went to the occult research club room, where he sank onto the couch and rubbed his temples to steady himself. Rias noticed his distress and expressed concern. Issei told her he had hallucinated something in the woods. Rias sat close and offered a comforting presence, resting a hand briefly on his shoulder. Issei gave a small, grateful smile and soon relaxed enough to fall asleep on the couch. Rias was taken aback by how quickly he slept and felt a flush of embarrassment at her own worry. She smoothed his hair gently and stayed with him for a while, keeping watch until Aquino, amused by the scene, produced a camera and teased them by taking a picture. The shutter click roused Issei awake. He sat up, dazed, while Rias hurriedly left the room to carry out her next orders. Aquino informed Issei that he had fallen asleep in Rias's presence and that Rias had been fussing over his hair while he slept. Issei gave a puzzled look and then returned his thoughts to the earlier encounter in the woods, the vision of his mother, the sensation of impaling someone that turned out to be a tree, and the unresolved unease it left him with. The time came for the meeting between the three factions. Issei and the others gathered in the chamber as Surzex entered and Azazel took his seat, sipping sake. Michael arrived with 5 attendants, all angelic representatives. Issei observed them closely, curious about the newcomers. One of the angels, a composed woman with silver-gray hair, caught his attention. Michael introduced the silver-haired angel as Lint Selzen and presented Issei, identifying Lint as the sister of Fried Selzen, who had remained with the church while her brother had gone rogue. Lint bowed and looked away, visibly embarrassed by Issei's stare. Issei apologized inwardly for his curiosity, and Lint, still blushing, accepted the apology and asked him to be more mindful in the future. The meeting was now underway as the 3 faction leaders discussed politics and how to handle the Kokabeel incident, since he was the one trying to start a war between the 3 factions. The most notable difference in this world was the White Dragon Emperor's absence from the meeting. Azazel judged his presence unnecessary because the Red Dragon Emperor was there. Azazel smugly suggested that they sign a peace treaty and get it over with. The other faction heads looked surprised by his bluntness. Azazel explained that he was tired of ceaseless fighting and wanted to focus on studying the sacred gears left behind by the Creator. Issei watched him and, quietly hopeful, realized that a peace treaty would mean they could finally live without constant attacks. As the leaders began signing the document, Issei noticed something falling from the sky. He grabbed Rias and, for a moment, everything froze. Surzex urgently informed them that their bishop's power had been activated and urged Rias to reach it as quickly as possible. Issei saw more and more magicians gathering and called upon his sacred gear with Draig's assistance. Issei took on the magicians himself and instructed Rias to save her bishop while asking Michael for help with the large group. Michael assigned Lint to assist Issei, told Irina to stay behind in case any got through, and sent Dulio to aid as well. Issei leapt from the window and activated his balance breaker scale mail. The magicians aimed their spells at him, but he was too fast. He defeated them one by one with swift, decisive strikes. Lint and Dulio handled multiple opponents. Lint used her Incinerate Anthem to overwhelm foes with flame, and Dulio relied on the church-taught angelic skills honed over many years. As their numbers dwindled, a portal opened and a new combatant appeared to challenge Azazel. Irritated by the continuing arrivals, Issei improvised a new tactic inspired by a show he had seen as a child. Draig, initially unsure, agreed to cooperate. Issei told Draig they were brothers, called on the dragon's power, and unleashed a massive explosive wave that expanded outward from him. Lint and Dulio acted a small barrier to protect themselves as the blast clouded the battlefield. The explosion reached Azazel's opponent, who had not been paying attention, and ended the immediate threat. When the dust settled, the area and the floating barrier in the sky were destroyed, and the magic circles that had been funneling reinforcements were severed. Issei floated down and sat, breathing heavily. Draig marveled at the amount of power Issei had collected and released, calling him brilliant for the improvisation. Issei admitted he had remembered a move from Dragon Ball Z where a character used a blast to scatter opponents. Dulio laughed about the spectacle and pulled out some food. Lint helped Issei to his feet. Issei blushed at the small kindness, and Lint found the moment quietly endearing to herself. Another explosion in the sky revealed Azazel in a balance breaker armor of purple, gold, and black. His 12 dark fallen wings unfurled as he faced a woman who had just arrived. Azazel quickly overwhelmed her in a brief, decisive duel and ended the fight with a precise strike from his downfall spear that rendered her unable to continue. He declared that he would offer only a small concession at most and would not trade his life for hers. As the group began to regroup, Rias arrived with Kaneko, Gaspar Vladi, and Asia, who tended to the wounded. Rias hurried over to check on Issei, visibly concerned. Issei reassured her that he was fine, having simply released too much power, and gave a thumbs up. He noticed that Lint had positioned herself closer to him, as if protective or a little possessive, and filed the thought away to consider later. When everyone emerged from their frozen state, They congratulated the leaders for finally making peace. Issei noticed Lint gazing at him with a slightly guarded, soft expression. Issei asked if she would be able to return sometime. Lint replied that she might if Lady Gabriel allowed it, but if not she probably would not. Then she left through a magic circle. Dulio left at the same time with Michael. Surzex expressed gratitude for their help in defending everyone so they could reach the peace treaty, then vanished into a magic circle. Azazel announced that they would see him soon, since he had a plan to make them stronger in the future so this would not happen again. Issei stood looking into the distance, thinking about his mother and about Lint, favoring memories of one more than the other. He did not notice that Rias was watching him with a quiet, disappointed expression. A young commander observed that the Red One had finally awakened and considered it good news. He planned to challenge the Red One later but first had a mission in the north against the Norse. He scanned his team, a familiar-looking girl with cat ears in a black kimono, a man with a monk-like bearing who carried a staff reminiscent of Sun Wukong's, a girl wearing a blue witch's hat and matching dress, and a tall man who used a golden sword as a cane, his blonde hair and glasses giving him a stern presence. The leader of the small group stood as tall as the staff-bearing young man. His white hair shimmered silver in the light, and mechanical white wings unfolded from his back, concealing the full span of his natural wings. Draeg's voice emanated from him, declaring that another great battle would come and expressing eagerness to see who the next host would be, confident that this time they would prevail. After that, the team vanished through a magic circle. After the battle against the Cow's Brigade, Issei and the other members of Rias's peerage repaired the school building until it was restored to its original state. Issei left for home with Rias and Asia following him. He did not know exactly why Rias came along, but her presence was not uncomfortable. He felt awkward at the thought of her seeing his room for the first time, remembering how Murayama had laughed about his hobbies the last time he had shown a girl his space. When they entered his home with Murayama and Keitase trailing behind, the others chuckled at the sight of his room. It had been decorated in shades of red and featured a pottery area. Along the shelves were sculptures of members of Rias's peerage, including a larger replica modeled after Rias herself with an exaggerated likeness that made Rias laugh. Issei apologized awkwardly for the inaccuracies and looked away, clearly embarrassed. Rias told him it looked beautiful and asked, curious about how he had managed to make them so well. Draeg teased him from within, making everyone laugh at Issei's flushed reaction. Rias examined another sculpture and asked about its accuracy. Asia explained that one figure's detail had come from an innocent accident, which led to more laughter. Murayama teased the group, and Asia chased her playfully around the house until the mood settled. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed, the conversation grew quieter and more serious. Issei admitted he was uncertain about what awaited him and worried about losing himself under pressure. Rias listened and then spoke frankly about her past, acknowledging that she had fought and had taken lives in the course of her duties. She made it clear that she understood the burdens of combat and the need to face difficult choices. Her tone was steady and reassuring, aimed at helping Issei handle his anxieties rather than escalating them. A short, calm pause followed, giving everyone a chance to rest and gather their thoughts. Plans for Issei's upcoming training in the underworld were mentioned, and the group prepared to set out when the time came. Lemon time? Rias prepared for a night she had been thinking about for a long time. She cared deeply for Issei and hoped to share a deeper connection with him. The two of them were alone in his room, tense with expectation and the awkwardness of youth. Issei reacted suddenly to something unexpected, and he warned Rias that something unusual was happening. They both froze, and the moment dissolved into a pause. A brief silence followed while they collected themselves. The door opened and Asia entered, her expression bright and hopeful. Rias and Issei both noticed her presence. Issei quickly cast a barrier around the room to ensure privacy and to keep them from being disturbed. He then expressed, quietly and earnestly, that he wanted Rias to feel how much he cared for her. The NTMT scene they had been preparing for never unfolded. Instead, the three of them found themselves overwhelmed by emotion and uncertainty. Rias felt a wave of conflicting feelings: love, apprehension, and a strange sense of being unprepared. The intensity of the evening shifted away from what they had planned and toward a softer, more emotional closeness. They spent the rest of the night wrapped in quiet conversation and gentle reassurance. Small touches of magic settled the room back into calm, and by morning, their bonds had changed in subtle but important ways. Rias realized she wanted to protect what she felt and to take things forward with care, while Issei and Asia each reflected on how much they valued her. In the end, the night became less about the physical and more about trust and understanding, leaving all three with a clearer sense of where they stood and what they wanted next. Issei and the rest of the Occult Research Club entered the magic circle and found themselves at a train station that led into the underworld. Issei noted that this was where Rias and the others came from. Rias smiled and explained that she and Sona had been raised in the underworld and hoped they would enjoy their stay. Issei sat down near Kaneko and rubbed her head to get her attention. He told her that being sad did not mean weakness and that anyone could feel down, but those who managed to smile in the face of danger were often the strongest. Kaneko asked bluntly what he meant. Issei clarified that people who could laugh and smile even when things were difficult tended to disarm or discourage attackers, though Kaneko admitted most of them had never smiled much in their lives. Issei encouraged her gently, admitting he was not the cleverest but that he had learned to hide his doubts behind a smile. Kaneko then used his lap as a cushion and fell asleep while he stroked her hair. Issei glanced out the window while still scratching Kaneko's head and remarked that the underworld looked very purple. The others laughed, and Kiba explained that although the sky was purple, the red-tinted sun still lit the entire underworld. Issei asked how Kiba was holding up. Kiba replied that he had never felt stronger since gaining his balance breaker. Issei said he was glad and mentioned that he and Kaneko had helped bring Kiba back to the peerage. Kiba noted that he was not technically part of the peerage, and Issei responded that friendship did not require formal ties. Kiba promised to try to protect Issei, and Issei returned the sentiment with a fist bump. Saji entered the cabin and began interacting with the others as Sona boarded to leave. Sona greeted Rias and mentioned how long it had been since they had held a young devil meeting. Rias sighed that they had to attend whenever it occurred and hoped there would be no fighting this time. Issei asked if there were strong devils to worry about. Rias identified Serordbale as an ultimate devil class level opponent, the strongest young devil in their circles. Issei expressed eager interest in sparring with someone that powerful. Rias noted that Sona would disembark before them and that they would meet again at the young devil meeting. After dropping Sona and her peerage off in the Citri territory, Rias and the others noticed the train had stopped in a mountainous area. Issei was the first to leave the carriage, followed closely by Azazel, who wanted to see what was wrong. Issei examined the train's engine, trying to understand the delay, and felt Azazel place a hand on his shoulder. Azazel asked Issei to come with him and warned that Issei's base power was approaching the level of Satan-class beings, and in Balance Breaker he was even stronger, near the peak Tanin had once reached. Azazel then teleported them away from the area. Rias and the others stepped out of the carriage and saw a giant dragon approaching. Issei wondered aloud why his father, Tanin, was present. Azazel explained that Tanin had been brought in to test the group, to see whether they were strong and resolute enough to be of use to Issei. The peerage rushed the dragon and were quickly overwhelmed, sent flying and struggling to keep up with the dragon's power. Azazel observed that although they knew Tanin's reputation, the goal was to test their resolve against a creature of ultimate class renown and to let them use a slightly reduced version of his power as a confidence-building challenge. He checked his watch and said that if they could occupy him for 10 minutes, they would achieve their goal and only need to train for the next 3 days before having time off until the young devil meeting. It had been about 5 minutes since the fight began. Seeing his friends being overwhelmed, Issei leaped into the fray to assist them. Azazel watched as Issei helped the peerage prolong the fight and reached the 10-minute marker while taking on Tanin in a draconic duel. It was Issei's first official time in the underworld, and he had wanted to acclimate to its presence before returning to the human world. After the fight, the group approached Azazel and asked why they had been forced to face Tanin. Azazel explained that they had become complacent after previous victories and needed a reminder that there was always someone stronger. While they spoke, Tanin used his overwhelming size and power to send Issei crashing into the ground in his draconic form. Issei was knocked unconscious, and his awareness receded into the boosted gear, where he spoke with Drake. Drake told Issei that Tannen had barely managed to contain him, which showed how quickly his power was growing. Drake advised Issei to focus on developing his draconic abilities. Drake told Issei that soon he would earn his aura, and he watched the younger dragon form with a patient, amused gaze. Issei's dragon shape was only half the size of Drake's, and he felt a little miffed that the old dragon was still twice his size. Issei asked how Drake could be so tall, noting that the elder dragon was standing on all fours. Drake explained that he had lived for thousands, perhaps millions, of years and had grown in an environment that allowed rapid expansion. Issei's life had not been as perilous, so he had not undergone the same harsh growth. When Issei asked whether he needed to meet those same requirements to grow as large, Drake clarified that all Issei needed was the power to survive any situation. Drake then remarked that Issei would be waking up soon. Issei promised he would free Drake from his prison and told the dragon that he felt a fond kinship, like the uncle he had never had. Drake accepted the sentiment but urged him to wake. Issei woke with a start to find himself in a dragon territory, looking up at his father standing above him. Tannen observed that Issei had grown many times stronger since they had last met and had reached the strength of a Satan-class being, which he praised as great progress. Tannen expressed a wish for Issei to become as strong as he was, the weakest dragon king. Issei nodded and took in his surroundings, a dense forest filled with small dragons about half his size darting through the trees. Issei asked whether this was where the dragons lived, and Tannen confirmed that this was the land he had claimed for the remaining dragons of the world. He said he had been their guardian and hoped to relinquish that responsibility to Issei after he graduated from his human school. When Issei asked why Tannen wanted him to be their protector, Tannen explained that being a dragon did not guarantee immortality. When his time came, the dragons would not be capable of defending themselves and would need a dragon king, someone at the heavenly dragon level, to protect them from enemies. Tannen sat beside Issei's draconic form and added that, with the Cow's Brigade active, he wanted an heir who could defend this place. Issei understood and asked when his training to become the Blaze Meteor Dragon King of Domination would begin. Tannen seemed surprised and pleased that Issei wanted to carry the title forward. Issei said that Tannen had been a greater influence on him than his human father. Tannen declared that such pride was the mark of a dragon and vowed to train Issei until Ophis or Great Red acknowledged him as one of the Dragon Kings. He roared, and Issei joined him in the triumphant call. A week later, Issei had been training with his father and missed the young devils' meeting. He had been surprised to learn that the Norse faction's god of mischief, Loki, had attacked and that others had handled the threat. Issei had wanted to be there to test his draconic strength against a strong opponent, but he was now dealing with a different annoyance. Diodora Astaroth, a young man claiming Issei's draconic form as his familiar. Issei had played along at first, but trouble began when Diodora demanded that Issei collect Asia Argento and bring her back. Issei questioned why Diodora would ask him to take someone who belonged to Rias Peerage. Diodora erupted with petulant accusations and claimed he had already taken possession of Asia. Issei judged the request unwise, noting that Asia was affiliated with Rias Peerage and that trying to take her would be dangerous. Diodora insulted Issei, who responded by explaining that he had personal ties to members of the Gremry Peerage and would not be ordered around. Diodora tried to attack with petty magic, but Issei hardly felt it. He only noticed the attempt and called out that Diodora's power was ineffective. Issei then decided to inform Surzex Lucifer about Diodora's connections with the old Satan faction and flew off. Issei arrived at the Gremry estate and called Surzex over. He reported that Diodora Astaroth had been collaborating with the old Satan faction and planned to take Asia hostage during the Young Devils raiding game. Surzex thanked him for the information and promised to act on it, then asked what Issei planned to do in the meantime. Issei said he would continue training with his father and was closing in on his father's realm of power, which Tannen wanted him to reach or surpass. Surzex encouraged him, saying he would be waiting for Issei to break into the top 10 strongest beings in the world. Issei responded with confidence that when he became the first heavenly dragon in thousands of years, he would challenge Surzex for the top spot among those who could stand against Great Red. Surzex smiled at Issei and told him that he would be awaiting his challenge and would meet it with his own, that he expected to be considerably stronger by then if nothing interfered, and that he would be glad to fight in the future. Issei walked around the underworld while he waited for Rias and her peerage, who were gathering their things to return to the human world. Once they went back, they planned to train on their own to grow stronger. Issei could not wait to become one of the 10 strongest beings, and he promised himself that Drake would be there to watch from outside the boosted gear. The next morning, Issei woke to find Asia and Rias asleep beside him. He stepped into the bathroom for a cold shower to clear his head. Asia and Rias woke not long after, groggy and disoriented. Rias stretched and remarked that it was certainly an unusual way to wake up. She almost lost her balance as she tried to stand, still shaky from sleep, and Asia laughed softly while explaining that Issei was probably in the shower and would arrive soon. Rias hurried to get dressed and said she would stop by the Occult Research Club, asking to be informed if Issei showed up. She then used a magic circle to teleport away. Issei re-entered the room and found Asia there. She hugged him from behind to say Rias had gone to the club, then left for her room. Issei dressed for school and left with Asia. At the Occult Research Club, Azazel occupied Rias's usual seat and addressed the gathered members. He announced that he would be the club sponsor until they graduated and that he had plans to help them grow stronger before the upcoming Young Devil meeting. He explained that a northern faction would be joining their treaty of peace, that the Norse would be a useful ally against the Cows Brigade, and that Rias might even gain a new servant from the Norse if she played her cards right. The students listened with a mix of awe and surprise. Issei pumped his fist at the thought of finally meeting the Norse Allfather. Azazel, amused by Issei's excitement, teased him briefly. Issei recalled meeting the Allfather as a child during a visit to the area and remembered the encounter as odd but impressive. Kaneko commented dryly that she was glad Issei had grown up reasonably well, and Rias glanced pointedly at Azazel. Azazel laughed and admitted the accusation, saying he at least tried to keep his more embarrassing habits under control. Issei and the others returned to the Occult Research Club with Azazel, preparing for the upcoming raiding game against Ghidorah Astaroth. Something about that devil unsettled Issei, and even Drake could not make sense of it. Issei resolved to keep a close watch. He did not want trouble in his territory. Their days until the raiding game followed a steady routine of waking, training, classes, and more training afterward. That rhythm was meant to keep them sharp, but the situation with Ghidorah kept disrupting their plans. Ghidorah had entered Rias Gremry's territory and repeatedly sought Asia's attention despite clear rejection. Asia had told him that her feelings belonged to Issei, and she did not return Diodora's advances. When Ghidorah appeared out of nowhere and attempted to seize Asia on the way to school, Issei intervened. He dodged Diodora's attack and kicked him, sending the heir sprawling against a nearby wall. As Ghidorah clutched himself in pain, Issei instructed Asia to find Rias and head to school while he dealt with the threat. After Asia left, Ghidorah struck Issei and then unleashed magic against him. Ghidorah taunted Issei, denouncing him as weak, while Issei remained defiant. Issei observed that Ghidorah was ignorant of the rules governing devil heirs and argued that killing in self-defense could be justified under underworld law. He also accused Ghidorah of hiding his true affiliations with the Cows Brigade. With no chance to flee, Issei struck back with a powerful blast that overwhelmed Ghidorah. The heir's presence collapsed into scattered residue on the ground. Issei prepared a magical recorder to send evidence to Surzex and walked away, reflecting that not all heirs who carried the name of their predecessors were trustworthy. Issei later caught up with Asia and the others and showed them the remains as confirmation that the threat had been dealt with. Rias contacted her brother to inform him of Diodora's involvement with the Cows Brigade and his attempts to abduct Asia. Surzex arrived and examined the residue before neutralizing it with controlled destructive energy. After Issei handed over his recorder and the compiled evidence, Surzex ordered a search of Ghidorah Astaroth's residence. The search turned up magicians and several Satan-class operatives, who were quickly subdued by Surzex with Graphia and Seraphal assisting. With Ghidorah exposed and removed from the board, the raiding game schedule was restored and Zephador Glaciolabalas returned to his position in the match against Rias's peerage. For a moment things settled and Issei allowed himself to think they were back to normal. Then the sky shifted to an unusual purple hue, and a Beelzebub air descended, furious. He accused Issei of being responsible for heavy losses among his forces and threatened retribution. Issei immediately activated his boosted gear balance breaker, scale mail, and engaged in a fast, intense aerial duel with Shalba Beelzebub. They traded blows across the sky in an energetic, anime-style confrontation. As the fight intensified, Issei began to recognize patterns in Shalba's movements and formulated a way to counter him. Before he could act, a second Satan-class figure appeared behind him, a silver-haired man whose aura rivaled Surzex's at full strength and whose power continued to swell. The newcomer fought with unpredictable, erratic strikes that gave Shalba the opening he needed. Issei grew increasingly annoyed and remained standing as both beings poured their power into him, one unleashing everything, the other only a little. He stood in the center, battered and furious. Shalba stepped back, convinced he had finished the recent Dragon Emperor of the Welsh kind. For a moment Issei simply stared at him, then vanished from sight and reappeared to send Shalba crashing into the ground. He moved behind him and struck with a decisive blow that broke through Shalba's defenses and left him incapacitated. Issei's expression stayed indifferent. Before he could follow up, the silver-haired devil materialized and effortlessly slammed Issei into the ground, rendering him unconscious. The silver-haired devil then took Shalba into a magic circle and departed. When the barrier dissipated, bystanders found Issei injured and unconscious. They called emergency services, and he was taken to the hospital. The next day Issei woke in a white room smelling of antiseptic and hospital food. Rias was at his right side, with the rest of her peerage, all watching him for answers. Rias spoke with sharp worry, asking what had happened and why he had not come home as planned the previous night. Issei explained that a Beelzebub heir and a very dangerous devil had appeared and attacked him, and that the silver-haired man had been the greater threat. He added that he had tried to keep that man in sight to avoid being blindsided, but that plan had failed. A voice asked whether he had at least defeated the Beelzebub heir. Issei informed them that he had incapacitated Shalba Beelzebub, but before he could finish the job the silver-haired man had struck him with overwhelming force. Surzex and Falbium then entered the room. Surzex asked whether the silver-haired man had seemed mentally unstable, and Issei confirmed that he had been firing blasts at random to keep Issei within range of Shalba. Surzex concluded that Issei had faced not only a Satan-class being but also a super devil at the same time, and that surviving long enough to neutralize one of them merited praise. Falbium remarked that he could use that kind of power on the battlefield, and Surzex said they would discuss deploying it once Issei approved. Surzex and Falbium left through a magic circle. Issei commented dryly that the situation was surreal, and the others in the room laughed. Kiba sighed and noted how Issei had a talent for turning serious moments into levity, and Issei joked back that they should blame the game and not the player. He then asked who they would face in the upcoming raiding game now that Jadora Shitsteroth had been defeated. Rias answered that their opponents would be represented by Zephidor of Glaciolabulus. Issei responded that at least it would be good training. He rose from the bed and began gathering his clothes. Draig cautioned him telepathically to be careful and not to do anything strenuous so soon after being so close to death. Issei asked Draig to prepare a training regimen, explaining that he wanted to be ready to face Serorg and to become a full dragon. Everyone reacted with surprise at that ambition. Draig agreed to begin work overnight but reiterated that Issei must not overexert himself and risk a return to the hospital. Issei assured him that he would be careful. Someone in the room brought up an awkward past training incident, and Issei brushed it off as merely an unfortunate coincidence during practice. Rias asked whether he might have been reckless enough to cause accidental harm, and Issei insisted he had been focused and would only direct lethal force at true enemies. To express playful skepticism, the others all pressed a controller button in unison to doubt him, and Issei complained that their reaction was rude. It was the day of the raiding game and Issei cheered for the Gremry peerage as they entered the stadium with Rias. Issei asked Surzex who he thought would win, and Surzex observed that Zephyr would likely have the advantage because he had more experience in the raiding games and Rias was still buoyed by her earlier victory over Sona. Issei admitted he hoped Rias would win. Azazel announced for the contestants opposing the Gremory peerage to come forward. The Glaciolabala's peerage entered the arena with Zephyr at the forefront, confident and eager for the fight. Zephyr taunted that he looked forward to defeating the House of Gremory. A woman then spoke from the crowd, and Surzex and Issei turned to see Runia's Gremory step forward. Runia's carried a striking presence, most notably her lavender eyes, and she introduced herself as Rias' predecessor and a powerful ancestor of the Gremory clan who claimed strong mastery over the power of destruction. Surzex introduced Issei to Runia's. Issei complimented Runia's eyes. She accepted the compliment with amusement. They talked briefly about ages and dragon years, and Runia's noted that although her body appeared youthful, she had lived many centuries. The raiding game began in earnest. Rias' peerage pushed Zephyr's group into a corner through coordinated skill and teamwork, forcing Zephyr to rely on his own strength and the support of his remaining pawns. Zephyr managed to overpower several members of Rias' team, and the battle intensified into a series of flashy, high-energy exchanges that looked like something out of an action spectacle. Zenobia and Gasper fought bravely but were eventually overwhelmed and had to withdraw. The climax of the match became a duel of spells between Rias and Zephyr. Rias held offensive superiority, but Zephyr's defenses and endurance allowed him to outlast her, and he was declared the victor. The Gremory team showed visible disappointment, and Issei left his spot to offer them consolation. Afterward, Runias entered the room where Rias and her peerage gathered and offered to help Rias train to control the power of destruction. Rias was surprised, having thought Runias might be elsewhere, and Issei, catching the mood, asked a quiet question about Rias' grandfather. Runias noticed Issei's reaction and found his interest amusing rather than troubling. Inside Issei's mind, Drake spoke with urgency about the need to train and prepare for greater threats, urging focus and discipline rather than distraction. Issei acknowledged his tendency to become distracted by intrusive thoughts and resolved to concentrate on getting stronger. Rias saw Issei briefly distracted by Runia's arrival and felt a momentary pang of concern, but Issei reassured her with a clumsy explanation about dragons and the strange influences that sometimes surrounded them. Rias sighed with relief. Runias, intrigued by Issei's potential, teased that he would have to work harder to earn her respect and support, framing it as a challenge rather than anything personal. Aquino made a light joke about Issei's reputation, and Issei admitted embarrassment while insisting it was not intentional. Kaneko quietly stepped back, keeping her distance but remaining attentive. They all settled into conversation, the mood relaxed but focused on the lessons to be learned from the match and the training that lay ahead. Issei insisted that he was not going to peep on the girls, blushing and flustered. The girls looked disappointed at his decision, and Rias teased him with a bright, embarrassed smile that suggested she enjoyed the tease. Issei worried aloud that their mischievousness might get him into trouble and edged toward the doorway to make a discreet exit. As he moved, he noticed Runias seated near the entrance. The girls called after him, urging him to stay, and Issei bolted down the corridor in a panic, shouting about how many of them wanted his attention in a comically exasperated tone. Runias appeared through a magic circle just as he reached the front door, grabbed him, and they vanished. When they reappeared in a quiet forest, Issei landed on the ground and thanked Runias for intervening, explaining that he had been worried the others would overwhelm him. Runias fixed him with a serious look that conveyed both sternness and a warning. She said that if the peerage was interested in him romantically, she needed to assess whether he was truly ready for such attention, and she performed a brief, formal magical examination to gauge his emotional state. The test was quick and discreet, and when it was over, Runias regarded him with a calculating expression before disappearing through a magic circle with a knowing wink. Issei confessed to his dragon partner Drake that Runias made him feel like he might be in danger, still reeling from the intensity of the encounter. Drake responded that Runias was a formidable romantic rival who demanded much from those she became close to and could be difficult to win over. Issei explained that Runias was Rias's great-great-grandmother and admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that he might find himself attracted to older women. Back at the hospital, Issei saw Surzex searching the main lobby and approached with some trepidation. Surzex dismissed Issei's concern for him and asked where he had been. Issei replied that he had gone into the forest for fresh air. Surzex revealed that Runias had hinted she might have found a new husband and regarded Issei intently. Issei offered a polite, slightly awkward wish that Runias find happiness, while Surzex pondered whether Runias had meant Issei himself. Surzex then prepared a magic circle to return them home and reminded Issei that Rias and her peerage were expecting him. Issei said he would see them soon, adding that he intended to spend time with Rias that evening. Surzex advised him to be a supportive partner, smiling as they vanished. As they traveled, Surzex reflected quietly that Issei had grown up with a troubled childhood and had long carried deep trust issues and a sense of being unwanted. He acknowledged that Rias had spent a great deal of time helping Issei heal and learn to trust and accept affection. Runias, looking out the window, noted that Issei's emotional baggage made him cautious, and that gaining his full trust required patience. When Issei reappeared at the Occult Research Club, the girls greeted him with boisterous enthusiasm. They surged forward to welcome him back and insisted on helping him relax by drawing a warm bath, their energy a mixture of affection and teasing. Asia cheerfully announced it was bath time, while Aquino and Rias expressed eagerness to take care of him in their own playful ways. Kaneko climbed onto Issei's back in an affectionate, stubborn manner, declaring she would not be left out. As the group playfully escorted Issei toward the bathroom, Kiba laughed and called after them, urging the girls to make him feel at home and to give him their full support. Issei protested loudly in a far less serious tone than before, his voice a blend of frantic and amused as he was led away by his friends. The scene remained light-hearted and full of camaraderie as the girls fussed over him and tried to make him comfortable. As Issei and his friends made their way to school, Issei concentrated on keeping his power in check. He had reached the escalon of the Dragon Kings in strength and had to be careful not to let it flare beyond that threshold and risk harming others. He arrived at the high school he had attended for years and moved to his first class of the day, taking his usual seat. Matsuda and Motohama, childhood friends since they were 9, joined him as always. Rumors followed them. Many students assumed Issei was a pervert because of the company he kept, but they were wrong. He tolerated the gossip with a weary look, more focused on his larger goal of becoming a harem king, a dream inherited from his human father. He wanted to earn that title through friendship, not force, and so far his approach had worked. Rias, Asia, Aquino, Kaneko, Ravel and Zenobia were all in his circle. Among them, Zenobia had been persistently interested in him, which he found exhausting. When class was about to begin, Zenobia leaned over and asked him to meet at the pool after school. He flushed, surprised at the directness, but said nothing more. Unbeknownst to him, the day had another surprise. 2 new students from other races were joining their school. The teacher announced that 2 new students would be joining the class and asked them to introduce themselves. Lint Selzen stepped forward and said she was new to the area and hoped everyone would take care of her. Runia's Gremory followed, explaining that she was Rias Gremory's younger sister and had come from Europe to visit for a few months. Issei felt a sudden jolt of panic at Runia's smile and thought that he was in real trouble. Draig laughed silently in his mind. As class continued, Issei tried to banish the distracting thoughts. Runias behaved in a way that drew attention, and she smirked at Issei's obvious reaction. Kates wondered aloud why Runias was singling out Issei. Runias answered that she wanted to learn the pecking order and that she would be staying with her sister Rias while she explored the town. Lint pouted at the exchange. Issei reached out and patted Lint's head. She leaned into the gesture but quickly blushed and pushed his hand away playfully. The usual jokers in the room complained dramatically about Issei always attracting new arrivals. After school, Issei went to the pool looking for Zenobia. He found her waiting there, evidently preparing for something. Zenobia greeted him with a mischievous smile and led him aside for a private conversation. Zenobia pushed Issei into the boys' changing room showers, and a brief NTMT encounter occurred that left them both disheveled. Issei later placed Zenobia in the women's changing room to keep her from being found by another student. When he closed the door, Zenobia lay on the floor, dazed and trembling. Issei entered the occult research club and Rias gave him a puzzled look at his disheveled appearance. Rias asked if he had been out having fun, sounding a little miffed. Issei feigned ignorance. Ravel bluntly asked if he had been in the changing rooms with Zenobia. Issei blushed and protested that they had seen him. Rias said they had seen what happened and that some members were upset, expressing disappointment that he could not have waited. Runias laughed and teased that he had been acting inappropriately. Issei blamed Runias for provoking his behavior. Rias asked who Runias and Lint were and they explained that they were joining the school to become part of Issei's growing circle of companions. Rias warned them that their unexpected actions had upset the group's plans and stared at Zenobia, who still looked embarrassed. They set off to clear out stray devils. Issei noticed Rias wearing a troubled expression and asked if she was all right. Rias admitted she was disappointed about losing to Zephador Glaciolabilis. He had been their best chance to challenge Serorg, and now that Astaroth had been exposed as corrupt, their options felt worse. Issei tried to stay optimistic and wondered aloud if things could get any worse. Suddenly the lights went out. Rias fixed Issei with a mischievous, narrowed look and teased that they had plans for the evening and he would not be able to avoid them. Issei panicked and tried to leave, but an unseen force pulled him gently back toward the group. He protested loudly and remained too shaken to sleep that night. Issei left his room the next morning with a hollow look in his eyes as he walked into the kitchen to cook for himself and Asia. He had endured a chaotic night he wanted to forget. Rias watched him with an expectant expression, but Issei focused on making breakfast and kept his thoughts to himself. He rebuilt the scrambled eggs he had dropped and carried on until they finished eating and left for school together. As they walked, Issei noticed Rias glancing at him more than usual. He massaged his temples and explained that he needed to focus on his studies for the day, and Rias accepted that they would meet later at the occult research club after school. Issei then sensed a presence nearby and saw Valley watching him from a distance with a challenging expression. He steeled himself and kept his mind on school to avoid being provoked. The day passed slowly. Math class went without issue and Issei felt confident in the subject. He still hoped to improve in English with plans to visit America someday. During the last class, a bright light flashed through the window and a violent blast ripped through the room. Issei instinctively threw up a magical barrier to absorb much of the force. When the light faded, the classroom lay in ruins and many students lay motionless. Valley stood at the window, furious. Valley demanded why Issei had not accepted his challenge. Issei replied that he did not want to fight and, in the heat of the moment, struck Valley. Valley reacted with outrage, accusing Issei of hiding and growing weak while he had prepared his whole life for this confrontation. Other devils from outside the school poured into the room and found Issei engaged with Valley. The altercation flared as Issei's aura began to intensify. The attacker had deliberately assaulted others to force a duel, and Issei answered by pursuing Valley. Issei broke through the window and activated Balance Breaker, chasing after the White Dragon Emperor. Back in the classroom, Rias and the rest arrived to see the wreckage and the aftermath of the explosion. Kates and Murayama were the only ones who had sheltered within a classmate and survived. They trembled with fear. Rias asked what had happened, and Kates and Murayama explained that someone had blasted the side of the building and shouted for Hayadu to face him. Rias reassured them that Issei would be all right, used a calming spell to ease their shock, and hoped silently for his safety as she began to repair the structural damage with her magic. Out in the countryside, Issei and Valley clashed with everything they had. Valley wanted a true measure of strength and demanded Issei fight at full power. The battle was brutal but kept within prodigious, non-graphic combat. Blows landed and both fighters staggered, pacing around each other with rising intensity. At one point Valley struck Issei hard enough to knock him down. Issei rose again, furious and determined, and declared that he would never allow others to be dragged into their conflict. Their energies swelled until they matched the might of Dragon Kings, and they exchanged a flurry of devastating attacks that sent them rocketing apart. Issei recovered faster, chased Valley through the sky and into the stratosphere, and then slammed down onto the ground with enough force to crack the earth beneath him. He set his stance and prepared one more decisive strike. Vale met his gaze and saw an unflinching resolve in Issei's eyes. Issei's form darkened with power, his eyes glowing with fierce intent as he readied himself to end the confrontation. Issei's punch shattered Vale's balance breaker armor and sent him crashing into the nearby mountain. Vale stumbled down from the slope, tasting metal and suddenly overwhelmed by nausea. He clutched his stomach and keeled over in pain, looking around to find no one standing directly before him. As he turned, Issei landed in front of him, anger clear on his face. Issei explained that he had wanted to let Vale live so they might become friends later, but because Vale insisted on fighting to prove who was stronger, Issei would ensure he could not return. Issei then shifted into his queen form. His power surged to heights comparable to Satan-class beings in the underworld, and Vale finally understood that Issei was the stronger of the two as Issei prepared his most powerful attack. Drake spoke through Issei's left hand, addressing Vale as a formidable opponent but chastising him for attacking those around Issei's host, declaring that Vale would not be saved from their retribution and regretting that their hosts were forced into such a conflict after so many millennia. Albion, sorrowful, agreed and expressed the wish that this would be the last fight between their hosts. Issei unleashed his signature attack, Longinus Smasher. Someone intervened and intercepted the assault. When the smoke cleared, Vale was gone from the immediate area, and the only person in the path of the blast was Kuroka. She had been watching from afar to see what had provoked Issei's fury and had lied earlier about where her leader was deployed. Now she smirked at the display and commented on Issei's surprising intensity. Issei warned that removing Vale would only make him want to continue the conflict, but Kuroka assured him that this would likely be the last battle for a long time and that she would keep Vale in line. She disappeared through a magic circle. Issei muttered that he could not believe he had managed to get Vale to leave with a subordinate again and resolved to stop getting into fights with him. When he returned to the Occult Research Club, he found everyone restored to the way they had been during class, with no memory of the hour that had passed. Issei smiled, collected his things from the classroom, and planned to return to Rias Gremory to deepen their relationship. Issei was brought into the room with Rias. She closed the distance between them and kissed him, both finally giving in to the feelings they had held for a long time. Their embrace was tender and intense, and when they pulled apart they were breathless. Rias expressed that she had been waiting for this moment for a long time and looked forward to being close to him. Issei replied in a deep, draconic voice, telling her how strongly he felt and how much she meant to him. They shared a private, NTMT moment together. Later, Rias used her magic to examine what had happened between them and discovered that the spark of new life had been set in motion. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions: joy, wonder, and a quiet shiver of concern while Issei looked at her with both love and fierce protectiveness. Rias smiled at him, and he returned the smile before he stepped back to let her rest. At that moment the door opened and Runias entered the room. She had come because Rias's brother had asked her to check on her, but she stopped short when she saw Rias lying there with a blissful expression. Runias commented with dry humor that they had not waited any longer to be together. When she tried to leave, the door would not open. She turned and found Issei standing nearby with an intense, unreadable look. Runias thought to herself, with worried exasperation, that it must be mating season for dragons of his age. The tense instant passed without further escalation. Runias left the room soon after, leaving Issei and Rias to face the consequences of what had changed between them. Runias used her magic to try to protect herself from the kind of influence that powerful dragons could exert on others. After casting the spell, she found herself in bed beside a sleeping Rias and with Issei there as well. Normally she would not have minded his presence, but she knew Issei was in a relationship with Surzek's sister, and the situation left her uneasy. She allowed him to stay close through the night, though she felt conflicted as she discovered she was responding to his attention more than she expected. When she checked her protective barrier, she discovered it had been weakened and worried about what that might mean, but the night passed without anything more to report. The next morning Issei woke with Rias and Runias beside him and could not remember what had happened. His last clear memory was that Rias had wanted time alone the previous night before everything went blank. Surzek glared at him with a stern expression and approached, then sat down heavily. Sersex accused Issei of impregnating his little sister and their ancestor, and Issei protested that he did not remember and had not intended for that to happen. Sersex explained that his sister had been instigating things as part of a punishment and expressed surprise that Runias had gone along, since she had not been NTMT since her husband died in the Great War. Runias, waking and yawning, explained that Issei had been placed into an induced state that caused him to act without clear memory or restraint. She leaned on his shoulder as she spoke. Sersex then reported that they had captured the remaining forces of the Cow's brigade and imprisoned them. There was nothing they could do to escape Hades, the god of death and destruction. Issei asked if that meant peace would return, and Sersex confirmed that it did, thanking Issei for his service as the Red Dragon Emperor and encouraging him to build a life and family. Drake advised him to rest, spend time with those he cared about, and make sure they were protected. Issei accepted the advice and promised he would listen. As Sersex departed through a magic circle, Runias tapped Issei on the head in a light-hearted reprimand for getting her P-Arginine and teased him about the amount of energy he had shown. Issei replied that he had not been around women who affected him so strongly for years and gazed out the window with them. The day continued, and life moved forward without immediate danger on the horizon. The chapter concluded with Issei preparing to face Valle in the final battle between the twin dragons. The other characters readied themselves and felt the tension rise as the decisive confrontation approached. 10 years had passed. Issei was in the yard training his son Reizi, who shared his hair and Rias's teal-green eyes. Issei told Reizi that they needed to increase his fire breath. As Issei released blue flames edged in red, Reizi watched with awe. A 10-year-old girl named Soria ran over to point out the difference between her father's blue fire and her brother's yellow flames. Rias, now 29 and carrying herself with a mature grace and hair increasingly like her older brother's, reminded Soria to keep her voice down and reassured her that her father and brother would handle the training. She added that they needed to ensure Soria's abilities as a devil grew even stronger than her brother's. Zenobia arrived and exchanged greetings with Rias. Zenobia said that Xavier was energetic and a challenge to guide. Rias laughed and joined the children as Xavier trained alongside his father, learning to become a powerful fighter. Valis soon appeared to test his children's strength against those of other families. He announced his intention to prove that the children of the White Dragon Emperor were superior and brought his own children forward. The girls glanced at Reizi and Xavier with shy smiles. Rias asked Zenobia whether she would bet that the children would become part of the family, and Zenobia declined to wager, recalling past mistaken bets and preferring to simply observe. While the kids sparred, Issei and Valle began a friendly but intense spar to maintain their standing as powerful dragon emperors. The children paused their own matches to watch their fathers power up and collide, a spectacular display of red and white energies clashing in an anime-style duel. When the match ended, both Issei and Valle bore bruises around their eyes and exchanged smirks, trading light-hearted remarks. About never changing. Valle excused himself to return to Kuroka, who was waiting for him, and Issei wished him luck before they parted with a friendly fist bump. Issei's wives approached and embraced him while the children gathered at his feet. When Ravel stepped forward looking nervous, Issei asked what was wrong. Ravel, having matured, announced that she was P-Arginine. Issei gently reassured her that he would protect her and the child. He hugged her and kissed her forehead, calming her with a warm, supportive smile. The family stood together, watching the distant mountains and smiling as they prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. Some distance away, a purple dragon fought a massive, terrifying beast far larger than Drake. The purple dragon fired a meteor-like barrage, but the creature pressed on through the assault. The dragon imagined his family and kin threatened by the monster and searched desperately for a way to hold it off until reinforcements arrived. Around him, many dragons lay defeated, including Petunia, who had fallen in the struggle. The dragon vowed that even in death he would not stop the creature, but his attack was overwhelmed and he was struck down. The rampaging beast roared and moved on, overpowering other dragons as it advanced. Sensing a powerful presence, it turned and flew toward the source of that power, only to be intercepted by representatives of the underworld and the gods. Surzex and the other leaders stood ready and declared that the creature, now known as Trihexa, would not pass. They would force it back to death or seals if necessary. The assembled powers surged forward to confront Trihexa, the creature said to surpass even Great Red in strength. Issei walked into his home where his wives were gathered. He noticed Lint sitting on the couch with her arms crossed and a pout on her face. Lint made it clear she felt neglected and wanted his attention. Issei approached her with concern and promised to spend time with her. They took a private moment together in the bedroom to talk and reconnect. Afterward, they returned to the others with their bond strengthened and harmony restored. Lemon over. The chapter concluded with the remaining original characters Ravel, Kaneko, and Kuroka left to appear in future installments. The final chapter of this volume is complete, but Issei's journey is not over. He still must confront the monster that killed Tannen. The next chapter will continue the story and focus on how these events resolve moving forward.